I call to order this special meeting of the Governing Board for the Scottsdale Unified School District. It is Tuesday, December 1, 2020, and the time is 5:03 p.m. All rise, and Vice President Beckman, will you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll have a roll call, starting on my right.
Jan Michael Greenberg.
Sandy Kravitz.
Patty Beckman.
And Allison Beckham. Board Member Perlberg will be joining us shortly. We do have a quorum. It is of 4-0. We do have a couple of a change to our agenda. We will be pulling 5B, approval revisions to the middle school and high school planning guide for it is the 2020-2021 year. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Board Member Kravitz moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
Board Member Greenberg seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. We have superintendent comments. Dr. Menzel.
Good evening, and thank you, President Beckham, Vice President Beckman, and members of the Governing Board. Tonight we're at December 1st and in the final 3 weeks of the current semester, one that I would say is extraordinarily challenging and difficult. And in my report, I'd like to address 3 issues this evening. 1, our ongoing challenges related to COVID. 2, I would like to talk briefly about the internal auditor position. And then at the end, I want to talk a little bit about the progress on conversations related to a long-term lease for 68th Street. So first, I want to begin by acknowledging that the decisions that we make at Scottsdale Unified School District are really focused on keeping students at the center of everything that we do. As a public education institution, we are focused on how we can ensure that we meet their educational, social, emotional needs in an educational environment. COVID has thrown everything into disarray in ways that none of us could have possibly predicted. And as you know, we've had ongoing conversations about the benchmark metrics, the current status of the infection rate in Scottsdale, advice and guidance from public health officials. And this week, we ended up with a decision on Sunday night that went out to our community to close 5 schools. And so I want to talk very briefly about how that process unfolded. There are a lot of emails that have been sent to me and to the Governing Board with respect to what happened, the timing of that notice, the reasons why it happened. And I want to make sure that we're clear about the things that unfolded and how and when they unfolded. So the Thanksgiving break started after Tuesday's school ended, and we had heard some concern, even though we had sent communication out to the community requesting that those who travel for the holiday voluntarily quarantine when they come back. We had heard concerns that not every person in our school buildings was convinced that our families would comply with that. We'd also heard some concern that there may be some teachers who, as a result of their concerns about whether or not people would comply, that they may not come into work on Monday. So we were prepared and monitoring the absences on Friday, on Saturday, and when we looked at those, they were higher than on a normal Monday, and we convened a special cabinet meeting on Sunday at 3:30 because we wanted to make sure we had the most accurate and current data. We did have quite a few more absences that were recorded on that Sunday. So in an ideal world, we would have been able to see the data, make a decision, and send communication out and do that instantly. But that's not exactly how things happen. So we collected the data. We talked about what we would need to be able to do in order to keep as many buildings open as possible on Monday, and then notify our families. And notifying our families means preparing a communication that accurately conveys what happened, what we're doing, why we're doing it, then getting it prepared for dissemination using InTouch, and also getting it translated so that we can send it to our Spanish-speaking families. So in my second email this week, we did acknowledge that late delivery is not something that we wanted to have happen. It was a product of getting all of those things in place. So for some who see an intentional or deliberate design in getting a late notice, that was actually not the case. But we did want to proceed with having as accurate information as possible to make the determination, and we wanted to minimize the number of schools that were closed accordingly. So we sent that out and we closed 5 schools, which allowed us then to be able to repurpose subs that we had. And as you know from our meeting a week ago Monday, our sub fill rate is and has been an issue of concern, particularly in some buildings, and that continues to be the case. However, that case is much more noticeable at the middle school and high school level than it is at the elementary. And that pattern has continued this week. So we made the decision to close those 5 schools, and then during the workday on Monday, analyzed what absences we had that we knew of going into Tuesday, and investigated ways that we could continue to redeploy staff at the teaching and learning in this facility, in the teaching and learning department and others, to be able to fill in those classrooms, so again, we could minimize the number of students impacted in terms of being able to staff our classrooms. As I said in the communication that went out to our families, I did have a conversation with Dr. Sonnenschein. We talk regularly with Maricopa County Department of Public Health. We've said repeatedly, and this is true, that when they're looking at the context-specific data, they look at number of cases in a building, evidence of spread within the building, and availability of staffing in order to safely provide in-person instruction. And we have talked about that conversation on an ongoing basis. So the decision that was made at the end of the day on Monday to have Arcadia, Chaparral, and Desert Mountain High Schools return to online learning for the balance of the semester was made in consultation with the health department. We were looking at the number of absences that were already available that were already recorded in our absence monitoring system, and making a determination that we could either close school again because we knew we wouldn't be able to staff, and so we might have closed 3 schools instead of 5. But then what happens on Wednesday? What happens on Thursday? What about student learning in this environment? And so when you think about where we are, and I'm just sharing how I think about the situation, I never wanted to close any of our schools before December 18th. My ideal would have been to keep all of our schools open for in-person instruction until the end of the semester. However, I also have to deal with the data that's in front of me. And the data in front of me indicated that we don't have sufficient staff, and I can't manufacture additional people to fill in if I don't have individuals in the classroom. And I am not laying blame. A lot of people who think we're blaming teachers or we're blaming the community. To me, this is not about blame. This is about the empirical fact that we had insufficient adult coverage to be able to safely provide in-person instruction in all of our buildings. And so then we had to make a decision. Are we going to continue down the road of closing and then maybe extending the school year? Or is there another course of action that can allow us to move forward and minimize the disruption for all of our students and be able to continue providing learning opportunities in a meaningful way? So when you put all of those things together, the decision related to those 3 high schools, which, by the way, are our largest schools with the most significant number of students, so you get a lot of concerns in terms of all of the other variables that are happening, we were able to have all of our other buildings open today. The issues that we had, the concerns about being able to staff, we were able to address those today. I anticipate in looking at the expected absences at the present time tomorrow that we're also going to be able to staff our buildings tomorrow. And so while it was very hard and heart-wrenching to make the determination with respect to those schools, the other thing that, just putting it in context, there are 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks now, of instructional time for our high schools. That 3rd week in December, you have review, and then the final 3 days are final exams. And so in making a determination, how can we ensure that the greatest number of Scottsdale Unified School Districts can continue to attend school in person? In consultation with the health department, looking at the data, that was the recommendation that was made and the decision that we made. And so I just wanted people to be clear, both in terms of intent and the pragmatic nature of the decision-making, and our hope that as we turn the corner into second semester, that we'll begin to see improvement with respect to COVID spread, that we'll be able to address the issues and concerns in terms of personal safety for our teaching staff. We've already done much of that. We have distributed and continue to distribute the KN95 mask. Dennis and his team are ready with plexiglass. Some of the things that have been requested, those are already in the works, and some of it has already been delivered to the buildings. So we're working on trying to address all of the concerns on a consistent basis. What I don't know, what none of us know, is what the data will tell us on Thursday. We do know that COVID cases have been rising. We know that it's not going to look better. Today, the batch data from the holiday weekend was reported, so depending on which news source you listen to, it sounded pretty shocking. But when you think about it as being representative of a number of days, it's still a disconcerting trajectory. And we're going to have to be prepared to deal with those things. We still have people who are testing positive, staff and students, and we're continuing to follow all of the mitigation strategies that we've been and have had in place since we returned to in-person learning. Again, the goal is to reduce the potential for spread of COVID in our schools and to ensure that we're able to continue providing meaningful learning opportunities for our students in person, as well as supporting those that have chosen to be educated online. One of the things related to sub-fill rate that continues to be questioned or raised, somebody said that, well, you're not filling positions for 3 to 4 weeks, which is not an accurate statement. In fact, it may take 3 to 4 weeks by the time you get fingerprinted, submit your application material, it goes through state processing in order to get approved. But we're not delaying processing people in the subsystem. We've been posting, advertising, and trying to get as many people vetted as possible so that we can have an adequate supply of subs. But as I've mentioned to the board previously, we are not the only district dealing with a sub shortage. In this COVID environment, everyone is dealing with some challenges in terms of providing full coverage, both in terms of instructional staff and those who are available to sub. One new development that if it's not out now, it should be out this week. The Center for Disease Control is modifying the quarantine requirements. And as I understand it, they're reducing from 14 to 10 the number of days that you would need to be quarantined, which is a really good thing because of that extended period of time, proves to be pretty challenging, particularly in an educational environment. So that reduction to 10 or 7 days if you have a negative COVID test at the end of 7 days. So there's some hope that, what's been a 2-week separation from school could be shortened to 1 week in terms of school days with the new guidance. And I've been told that Maricopa County will adopt those CDC guidance as soon as everything's finalized. So that, I think, is positive. And then I just want to acknowledge two realities that I'm observing in Scottsdale. One is that our staff have been working in a really impossible and challenging environment. There was a New York Times article about the unsustainability of trying to juggle in a COVID environment, in-person learning, online learning, managing the mitigation strategies, which are all on top of what you would do normally. Long days lend themselves to teacher burnout, low morale, and a lot of frustration. And I want to acknowledge that our Scottsdale Unified staff have done a tremendous job in working to meet the needs of our students. And it's not unreasonable for some to be fearful in this environment. There are a lot of unknowns, and so I don't want to discount that. At the same time, in our community, there's an expectation and a need for in-person instruction. And what I don't want is to have us in a situation where we're pitting both sides against each other. At the end of the day, I believe that the Scottsdale Unified staff want our students to get the best education they possibly can, and I believe our community wants their children to get the best education they possibly can. What none of us know or can really control is the COVID variable. And so we're doing the very best that we can in navigating this environment. And I would ask for some grace on the part of our community, on the part of our teachers, and some understanding that as we navigate this, there's not a perfect solution. Anyone can point to any other district in the valley and say, well, do what they're doing. But no one's doing exactly the same thing, and everybody's dealing with these challenges as best they can with the information they have in the context of their community. And so I hope that that kind of helps provide some context for the decision-making. We said we're reviewing the data on a daily basis, and we are. And we're doing everything we can to provide the support for our staff. And my goal is that we will be able to keep the other 26 buildings open until December 18th. But if the data requires us to do something different, we will follow the data in consultation with the health department and be consistent with what we said we would do. A couple of numbers just to kind of share what Monday looked like. We essentially had a 30% fill rate on Monday if we wouldn't have closed the 5 buildings. And typically on a Monday, we have 68.8%. And so that's kind of where the pinch point was that required us to take that kind of action. On Tuesday, we ended up with a higher fill rate, and that's today. And so we can see the positive shift already in terms of being able to cover in our classrooms. So that's the COVID update. I hope that I didn't forget anything. I want to shift to the internal auditor conversation because a few meetings ago it was one of the requests to put it back on an agenda. And I want to thank Board Member Greenberg in particular for doing a lot of the background work and bringing back best practices, what other districts are doing, thinking about what policy changes would be required to consider bringing life back to, we already have a position that's provided for in board policy, but really doing something that's more meaningful. I also thank President Beckham in terms of her interest in investigation in this process. One of the things that as we were preparing for this meeting, we talked about was the city of Scottsdale has an internal auditing department. And I had planned to have a conversation with the city manager, and that didn't happen until the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. In my conversation with him, I learned a couple of things. One, that he's got a CPA background and has actually done this auditing work, so he's really well versed in what it looks like, how it can work well, what are some of the pitfalls. But more importantly, Sharon Walker from the city, who is the internal auditor and leads that department, she has experience in the school realm because she came to Arizona working in the Auditor General's office to establish the school division. And so I had a very nice conversation with her today about some of the things that she could bring to the table in terms of providing advice, guidance, and support for how we might want to think about it. And both of them left open the opportunity that we might be able to work with the city of Scottsdale. It might not be required that we hire our own person because a department of one is really difficult to be able to get all the work done. And so it's possible, there's a lot of other things that have to be explored, but possible that we could do something in partnership with the city. And so rather than rush the conversation, what we're proposing is to have a follow-up conversation to see what we might be able to do with the city. At a minimum, we're going to learn a lot in terms of what they've done, what works well, how things should be structured to operate functionally, and then we can bring it back for future consideration. The third item is one that this conversation started before I got here. But Phoenix Rising has expressed an interest in leasing the 68th Street property and making some improvements in terms of soccer fields, practice fields for them, as well as a walking track and some other recreational amenities for the neighborhood. And we are a little bit further in the process. We have some draft drawings, and on December 10th, there'll be a hybrid in-person virtual meeting held here at MDA Conference Room A and B to share the Phoenix Rising proposed long-term development of the 68th Street campus. We are in the process of working with legal counsel and realtors to identify what a fair market value would be so that we can be sure that the rate that's charged is one that's fair for the use of the property. And there's also the benefit that accrues to the district related to the improvements of the property that would be owned by Scottsdale Unified. So the process is moving forward. It's moving forward slowly. We absolutely want to hear from the community, which is why we're having this meeting before we bring anything to the board for consideration. But I just want to let you know that that's the next step in the process. Yes, Patty?
how are we communicating to the community how the meeting is going to be set up? Meaning, are we having it in person? How many people are we going to allow? Have they been notified? I just want to make sure that we overly communicate how they can attend this meeting.
So Dennis and I had the conversation this morning, and I don't know if Dennis is available online because part of the RSVP for the meeting is being managed by Rose. Yeah, the Rose Law Group. So that's part of it. And I know we've got a group that has met previously. And so I don't know what vehicles Dennis has used before to get the word out, but I suspect he'll use those channels. If there are others that you have in mind, please let me know and we'll do that as
Okay,
well.
and I will, because I do feel this is really important to the community. It's been a long time coming, and I want to make sure that, similar to our rebuilds or our builds,
Right.
that we do maybe door flyer, something that lets that community know and the neighbors know that may not otherwise get emails or be involved in our schools of what we're planning for that area, and let their voice be heard. So if you can make sure that Dennis has a nice conversation with you and the board or whatever about that we are overly communicating, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. And with that, that concludes my report for this evening.
Board Member Kravitz.
Do you have a time yet scheduled for that meeting?
It's 6 o'clock that night.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Menzel. Board Member Perlberg joined us at 5:06 PM. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you.
We'll move on to information and discussion items. Discussion item A, Student Advisory Board 2020-21 presentation on our 5 high schools in Scottsdale Online. Dr. Menzel, do you have any comments? And would you please introduce our presenter?
Thank you, President Beckham. And after the presentation at our last meeting, we knew that we were going to come back with a student presentation over the next few months. But what surfaced was we had data from students that was reacting to our current delivery system. And in conversation with the Student Advisory Board, which happened, I think, a couple of days after our board meeting, we all agreed that it made sense for you to have information from all of the high schools before we start the second semester, so that if there are actionable items, that we could take those into consideration. So the Student Advisory Board did some very quick work to get voices from all of our schools. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Sackos to introduce our student speakers and the presentation.
All right, thank you, Dr. Menzel, Madam President, members of the board. First of all, look at this amazing group of representatives from our high schools, and we do have one joining us online. So without any further ado, I'm going to welcome Caroline Carter, our president, who is a Chaparral High School student, and Trex Jones, our president-elect, back to the podium, and Trex is the president-elect. So they're going to begin the presentation, and then they are going to introduce each representative from the respective high school to come up and do the presentation specific to the information they gathered from their peers on campus. So with that, Trex and Caroline, please join me up here. And senators, you can have a seat and wait until you're called up. Thank you, guys.
Good afternoon, members of the board, Dr. Menzel, and guests. And Madam President. Once again, I'm Caroline Carter. I'm a senior at Chaparral High School. I'm the president of the Student Advisory Board.
And I'm Trex Jones, President-elect, Representative Arcadia.
And today we gathered information from all the rest of the high schools in the Scottsdale Unified School District and compiled another presentation to give to you all today. We actually have 2 students joining us online, but yeah, it's going to go great. So the first school we have is Scottsdale Online, and we have Paul.
I'll be introing this, though. So with the data, we saw 921 responses. Of that group, freshmen were 30%, sophomores were 26%, and juniors were 24%, and seniors were 20%. We forgot to add that to the presentation, so sorry about that. But we also went farther into the questions, and we said, are you staying with SOL for second semester? We saw 58% say yes, and 42% say no. And when we asked them where are they going to, they said they're switching. 60% said I'm not, 28% said they're switching to in-person, and 12% said EDL. And now, what's not going well with SOL is DBAs, discussion-based assessments. What those are is a teacher asks you a question, and you answer them, and that's what your grade is dependent on. These are stressful, as we've seen with some students, and students are getting stressed out because this is very different from their normal format of a test taking and using a pen and paper. They're getting asked questions about the whole assignment, and some teachers are very good about this and say, these are the questions I'm going to ask you, prepare for this, and some teachers just give no guidelines. So it leaves students stressed out and wondering, what do I need to study to go forward with this? Another thing is long teacher response times. I have some teachers that will respond in minutes or hours, and it's perfect because I can continue with my lesson and keep on going further and get my homework done. But I have some teachers where it takes days, and we've seen this with the survey too. Students are complaining and they can't get their homework done the same day because they don't understand the assignment, and they just wish to have quicker response times or better ways to communicate with their teachers. Overwhelming. So overwhelming is just the students have some days where you have 6 assignments, and that's really stressful, and some days you have 2 assignments. And students just wish to have that balance out. Why not have the day with 2 assignments with more of that, just like 3, and then change the 6 to 5 and try to lessen out the load and balance it out throughout the week instead of having easy days and hard days. Now, procrastination and motivation was a big thing that came up. This is because of the 7th-day grace period. Some students just look at the 7th-day grace period as something they can delay the homework and not have to do it for 5 days or 3 days. And it does have its pros and cons. The 7th-day grace period has benefited students to pace themselves and help them with their assignments, but it does lead to some procrastination. And now off to Paul.
Once again, my name is Paul Cadavy, and we also asked students what is going well with SOL. First of all, for students that know how to manage their time, the pacing and independence was a very nice touch. Students also highly enjoyed the flexibility of SOL, allowing them to work jobs, sleep in, and still get all of their work done on time. Lastly, for students who aren't so good at managing their time, this is a great opportunity to do so. Learning how to manage time may not seem very exciting right now, but it's a skill that will surely help them in the future. Finally, the last thing we asked SOL students was if they had any recommendations. First, students suggested that there should be a reduction in frequency or weight of the discussion-based assessments. This would make the DBAs appear less stressful and will make students more open to ask questions to the teachers. Second, students recommended that teachers could provide helpful videos or regular tutoring times. Sometimes, the material in the modules, such as the videos and the texts, can be pretty outdated. Thus, it would be extremely helpful for teachers to provide videos and/or work sessions for those designated lessons. Third, students suggested a less workload and/or catch-up days. Some days you'll wake up and have 2 assignments. Other days you'll wake up and have 7. And once again, if you don't know how to manage your time very well, this can be pretty overwhelming. Lastly, students suggested a consistency in communication platforms. Personally, I find it very frustrating having to switch between Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and even my teacher's phone number to have a simple conversation. In the end, students, myself included, would highly appreciate it if teachers could choose, say, Microsoft Teams, for example, and stick with it.
At this point, I think what we'll do, since you're divided into 3 groups, is we'll go ahead and just open up for any comments or questions that the board might have. Board members, Vice President Beckman.
So, again, every time you all present, I think it's the highlight of our month or night or whatever. You're just so wonderful to have you here. First of all, we're not seeing many students lately. And second, it's just fabulous to hear your point of view. We work kind of in this room trying to do everything for you, and to hear how it's being received is wonderful. Are you a SOL student, or are you just here kind of delivering the information?
I am currently a sophomore at SOL.
Okay, you are, good. So, with regard, I agree, because I'm very familiar with the SOL platform. Regarding the communication platforms, are you referencing just the everyday touch base regarding Zoom or Teams or phone, or are you talking about like the DBAs in communicating, or both?
Both.
Okay, because I know they use a multiplicity of different platforms for those DBAs and scheduling them as well. I'm just curious, do you find it difficult when you schedule those DBAs, getting them scheduled, and sometimes because our teachers have a lot to schedule, I don't know if everyone else is familiar, but if you miss that date that the DBA is due, it logs a 0 in for your grade, and then you have no idea of what your real grade is until you have the DBA, which could be like a week or two. I don't know if you're experiencing any frustration with that as well, as long as also with the communication. Have you had that occur in any of your?
Personally,
Yeah.
that hasn't happened to me much, but I know friends and fellow peers where that has happened to quite a lot.
Okay. And so the communication you're getting back, last question, is mostly like centering around kind of the workload is the primary, juggling the 6 classes all at once?
Yeah, like I talked about a few times, the time management, that's a part you really have to figure out, or else it's going to be very difficult to get going in Seoul.
Okay. Last thing, Dr. Menzel, you had pointed out that it had been communicated, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when we began, if you took a quiz, if you were to retake that quiz, no matter what your score was the second time, you were going to receive that second score. And so I had a question about that because I thought that would make our students not want to attempt to take the quiz again because it would deter them from wanting to take a 75 if it was a hard class or an 80, and they really do the calculation before taking on the risk. And you had mentioned that had changed. And so I wanted to, if I'm correct, I wanted to use this as an opportunity to let our kids know that maybe didn't know that had changed. So if they were circling back to try and retake some of those quizzes, maybe they would hear it tonight and do so before the end of the semester.
It's my understanding that communication went out on Monday. I don't know, I didn't see if it went out, but that was my understanding. It was going to go out on Monday.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I'll follow up with that. Did you receive the communication on Monday? And then we'll know. Are you aware of the change?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, good.
At least a good start. Board Member Kravitz.
Did you mention, thank you, first of all. Did you mention that some of the materials are outdated? Did I
Yes.
hear that? Dr. Sakos, is that a function of Florida Virtual Learning and the materials that they provide to Scottsdale Online, or?
Board Member Kravitz, so Florida Virtual does frequently update the content in Florida Virtual, and then our lead SOL teachers and our curriculum specialists need to go in and update it in our system, if you will, so it's a little bit complicated. So that is a frequent process. Florida Virtual is aware of the concerns that we presented on outdated material because students do let us know, and so they've been very responsive in making sure those are updated.
Have you noticed that they've been updated, or
I have
is
not.
there a link? Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from board members? I have one. Also, thank you for being here tonight. Were there any survey questions on the actual academics? How do you feel that the material that is being provided, are you able to learn at the same pace that you were when you were in person with the Scottsdale curriculum?
Personally, I feel like I am learning slower in some classes and quicker in others. And it's kind of a personal thing. I know my friends, some of them struggle in math class virtually, some of them don't. And it really just depends on how you learn.
Was there a survey question regarding academics?
No, there was not.
Oh, and, okay, all right, then. All right, thank you. Well, if there are no other questions, I believe, then maybe we'll go on to the next school. I don't know, Caroline, are you up next?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we're going to call Kennedy Johnson and Trex Jones from Arcadia.
Okay. Hello. Hi, Madam President and members of the board. So Arcadia, what we saw was we had 226 responses, or 221, that we had changed the data because we got a couple more responses, but 23% said the school year is going good. 57% said it's going okay, and 20% said no. Now, what is going well with Arcadia High School right now, in-person learning? People are really benefiting from this and benefiting from in-person because it's just like what we've been doing for the last couple of years. That's why I'm personally changing from SOL to in-person, because I learn better that way, and it's just better for me, and I think that's really important for students to have that opportunity. Students are really liking the 3 class day periods because it helps with workload. You have 3 classes, you can focus on those 3 classes, and then the next day you have the 3 other classes, and it helps with the workload. And then making questions are very easy to ask in person. We saw that with the last presentation from, I think, Chaparral, where EDL is hard for people to ask questions, but in person it's very, very easy, and students are very able to learn the content of the lessons very quickly. And then we had SOL questions come up, and people talked about how the 7-day grace period has been great for them. That was just from a few people from that. And then seeing teachers and friends have helped with mental health. Students have loved this. They have a sense of normability. It's normal for them, and they talk to their friends, and it really just helps them learn. Having that sense of, I can talk to somebody else about this lesson, I can talk to my teacher about this, and just having that human connection has really helped with mental health for students at Arcadia. Now Kennedy Johnson.
Hello, Governing Board. I'm Kennedy Johnson. So what's not going well? The workload has proved especially difficult for EDL students and in-person students, especially on the weekends getting work. I think a lot of students feel that their teachers don't understand that the weekend is kind of their off days, and they're providing too much work for them. The inconsistency is proving especially hard. I think students would like there to be a set plan for the second semester. It's harder to be motivated when learning is in your own hands. I think this particularly pertains to EDL students. Projects are really difficult for EDL and SOL, and students feel that teachers need to be especially flexible during these times. Recommendations. The students at Arcadia feel that the workload is overwhelming, especially with finals coming around. A lot of students have said that the finals, not knowing if they're going to have one or not, is proving especially stressful. Many report wanting their teachers to have office hours similar to SOL so that they can get a better understanding rather than emailing. Students also want teachers to be stricter when it comes to health guidelines. An example might be wearing your mask under your nose. Honorable mentions. These are some quotes that some students wrote in their responses, and I think that this pertains to a large majority of Arcadia students. Not being able to complete schoolwork due to complications in personal life, not having the resources to complete these assignments, and to be consistent with decisions made for the upcoming semester. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Board members, do we have any questions? Well, I'll ask one, and I have to pause. What was your first name again?
Kennedy.
Kennedy. It's nice to see you. Thank you for coming. You had just mentioned access of resources, unable to access the resources. Could you expand on that? What resources might that be?
Resources for Arcadia in-person students, it could just be as simple as Wi-Fi. I know that for SOL there's hands-on labs, and so it could be something of not having the materials at home to complete your assignments, especially if you're EDL and over the phone or over a computer.
And normally would those resources be at school if you were in person? That's why I'm trying to get a feel for.
Yes, just internet connection, working on your assignments from computers.
And can you also then talk a little bit more about the workload? Pre-COVID, you had 6 classes and you went for the 6 hours there. Now you have 3 classes and then you're coming home and doing asynchronous on the other 3. Are the students finding that they're given more homework, if you will, or more projects? So that
Yes.
you're actually working more hours per class, or is it the managing of time the issue?
So students have reported having a lot of busy work, unmeaningful work, especially with the longer periods. And I think students want main assignments that are going to help them understand the subject and not a bunch of scattered assignments. And I also think that the workload might pertain to kids who aren't understanding as well. And so they're getting a lot of work and they're not understanding the material, and it could be overwhelming for them.
Okay. Thank you. And in that case, maybe the set office hours might help, or tutoring setup. Okay. All right. Board Member Greenberg, did you have a question?
Oh, no, actually, I just answered it myself. I apologize. Thank you, though.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you, and thank you, Arcadia, for filling out the survey.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kennedy.
Next, we're going to call up Stella Ranger from Saguaro.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Stella Ranger, and I'm currently a junior at Saguaro, and I'm here to represent them as their senator. On the form that we sent out, we had 473 responses. One of the questions was, how is the 2020-2021 school year going? We had 31.1% said that their school year was going well. 12.9% said that their school year was not going well. And 56% saying that it was going kind of well, so they're in the middle. From these responses, we were able to look at our data and come up with this table, what is going well and what is not going well. What's going well at Saguaro is our tutoring opportunities. Our National Honor Society is in charge of tutoring, so basically, we ask students that are comfortable teaching and helping other students, and they could set up a time on a Zoom meeting or meet up at school. Also, we have something called the Cat's Den, which is after school, we meet in the library and other students just help, and teachers go there and help other students. This is really great because it's also free. So students that don't have the money to afford a tutor, this is a great way to just get that extra help. The different dismissal of times. So for our 7th period or our 3rd period, our second floor is dismissed at 11:43 a.m. And the downstairs building is dismissed at 11:48. This can help with crowding because compared to last year, getting to your car, getting picked up by your parents was such a burden because you had to walk through many students. This has helped with social distancing as well. We've had 2 club rushes at Saguaro, one for our Math and Science Academy and one for different clubs. And I like to say with the circumstances that we are in today, this was pretty successful. We are very lucky today at Saguaro to be open, now compared to the other 5 schools. And this makes going to school in person is making it so much easier. I have been in EDL for 2 weeks due to close contact, and I've been in person, and I can tell you that learning is so much easier when you have your teacher right next to you. Most masks are worn properly at Saguaro. Like I said, I go to Saguaro in person, and when I walk the hallways, I mostly see students wearing their mask properly. 72% of the students that responded to the survey go to school in person. Now let's look at what's not going well. The workload is overwhelming, just like the other school have said, and this can cause the lack of motivation. Just getting behind in so many assignments, it's hard for a person to push themselves to get it done. Sports are being canceled and postponed. Our football team just got their season canceled, meaning we can't go into playoffs. 58% of the students have been emotionally affected during this pandemic. 60.6% of the students have seen their grades change. And what I mean by this is compared to different years, they could be A's or B students, and now they have B's or C's. Our recommendations. Evening out the time on EDL could help the workload for the students. What I mean by this is making the EDL classes longer. Like I said, in school, it's the perfect amount, 73 minutes, because you have the time to teach a lesson and the time to do homework sometimes. And by being in EDL, you have this short amount of time that you cannot get your work done, or you have to do the homework. So instead of having no assignments when you leave the day, the EDL students have 2 to 3 assignments to do. Continue with the 3-period schedule. This has seemed like most students are very comfortable with this. Have teachers use the same platforms. Students on EDL have trouble keeping up with the platforms teachers use. I mean by this, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Classroom, and from our data that we got, Google Classroom has seemed to be the easiest to manage for students. One of the questions we asked on the Google form was, do you have any safety concerns at Saguaro? And the student said that we should have more sanitation stations. And by walking inside your class, there's always hand sanitizer. So you get in and you get to clean your hands. But what do we do when we're in the hallways and we have to open the door? So it would just be, I feel like it would make students more comfortable if we just have spread out throughout the campuses, more hand sanitizer, maybe wipes or anything like that. Some feedback from students that I would like to talk is work on a program for support. On one of our questions in the Google form was, do you have an adult in campus that you're comfortable to talk to? 70.2% of our students said that they have an adult that they could talk to whenever they're feeling sad, or they just have a problem at home. But we cannot forget about that other percentage. And I know 70% looks like a really big number, but that other percentage is 141 students. 141 students that just need help or someone to talk to. By building a program for support, this could help other students. And from the 58% of the students that have been emotionally affected during this pandemic, this can come in handy. The last quote is, school has been a lot harder for me personally, and I'm always stressed out due to it. If we have some of these changes that I've just mentioned, I believe that this could help with the students and their stress and what they're feeling every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
No, just a comment. I'm just in awe of how articulate and like spot on you guys are with stating, things that we need to address. And, I always come away from your comments going, of course. So,
Thank you.
I do have a couple questions. When you say evening out the time on the EDL, is this, as I believe it was Arcadia that talked about, where it is for mainly assignments and is it DBAs?
That was SOL.
That was SOL, okay. So can you explain a little bit more on evening out the time for EDL?
Yes, I believe, I'm not very sure, but I know our classes on EDL are about like 30 to 40 minutes long. If the classes were to be longer, this could help to get the assignments done. So also, I do mean by having the extensions longer for students to get the work done. But I know that not in all my classes, there's live streams. When I am doing EDL, I like to join the live streams because I just feel like I understand better. But the classes are just so short that it's just hard to balance out the work and trying to learn at the same time.
Okay, all right. Because on ADL, you do have different assignments than if you were in person as well.
Yes.
Okay. And it's interesting because what I heard from everybody was the workload is more, yet the recommendation is to keep the 3-period schedule. So did those two things, they didn't go hand in hand then?
Well, what I mean, like,
So, can I,
Oh, you
so
go ahead.
maybe I can, was there a comparison in the survey whether you would want the 3-period schedule or going back to the 6-period schedule?
for Saguaro, we did not have that, but we did have like some questions that was like, is there anything that we can do to make your school year better? And from the data we saw, I saw a lot of responses that said that they would like to keep the 3-period schedule. I believe from my personal point of view, the workload is just so much worse than compared to last year because the class we have time is very long, 73 minutes. It's a big amount of time to go over a lot of things, which is good for the teachers. Like for my A-push class, I went over the Civil War in one class, which is really great. And I just believe that because of the homework it's kind of like expanding. We have to do this assignment on this whole lesson. And compared to last year, we had 40 minutes of class, and it was parts of the lesson. So the homework and the work is just so much more stressful because it's like a bunch of questions and so many material to cover in that one assignment.
All right, Board Member Kravitz?
I think the person who spoke before you from Arcadia mentioned something about busy work and that. Do you find that that is an issue at Saguaro as well, or that the quality of the work is not an issue?
Well, I could speak for myself that right now I have been pretty good at getting my assignments done on time. But by looking at other students, it really depends on the class you're taking and the workload. So if you're taking an AP class, the workload is going to be significantly bigger.
Right.
But if you're taking a regular class, then the workload isn't going to be that bad. I believe, speaking for the students, I believe the workload isn't as terrible as it could be. It's hard, it's high school, we have to go through it no matter what. But I believe that if we have the extensions or have more time to work on it, it would be easier for students. But on the other hand, this could cause more trouble, like we've seen on SOL kids or EDL kids, that we procrastinate the work and time management skills aren't the best for our teenagers today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Greenberg.
If I may, that was actually the question I had before, but I was going to wait till the end. All of the schools on here, including Chaparral before, had the exact same recommendation. And so, not to bring this up during your part, because that'd be more of a conclusory point, but it would be nice to have that, because we are reviewing tonight our Plan B system, but our Plan A is to have full days of learning next semester. And there is that question about especially if you're staying on EDL, about having a full day of classes on your computer and being in person if there's a workload change. Now, I do think you're probably right there, that by having a longer class period and covering more information, rather than having maybe, one assignment on the Civil War on Monday and then another assignment dealing with the same topic on Tuesday, you're now having all of that on one day, plus you then have to prepare for your other 3 classes, if you have 3 classes on the following day. So I would assume that that analysis is probably correct, but I guess it's just, I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to know how our students generally feel, if that's a main priority or if they would prefer to have that kind of essentially
Right,
back
there
to
is
normal
that
with
question.
the exception of Wednesdays. Yeah. All right, sorry, I apologize.
That's
Didn't mean to
okay.
segue. It just, the board president brought up a very good point.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Next, we have Samya Viswanathan from Desert Mountain, and she is on the Teams meeting currently, so she's going to be talking from there.
Good evening, governing board members, Dr. Menzel and Ms. Wagner. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can.
Okay, great. My name is Somya Vishwanathan, and I'm currently a senior. Today, I'm representing Desert Mountain High School as their Student Advisory Board Senator. On our survey, we received 431 responses, with 78% being in person and 22% being EDL. 47.6% of our respondents said that this school year was going well for them. 25.8% said it was not going well, and 26.7% had no opinion, meaning they said there were some things that were going well and some things that were not going so well. So breaking this down further, what are some things that are going well? Many students stated that they're learning so much better when they're attending school in person. It's just so much easier to connect with your teachers and other peers and participate actively in your learning because you're asking questions, working on group work, and it's just so much easier to have that transmission of knowledge occur there. Some students indicated that the current 3-period schedule actually helps them learn the material better because they have that extra time. That 73 minutes serves as a good period for teachers to deliver their lessons that day, and then students have an opportunity to ask questions about those concepts as well as get clarifications on their assignments and even work on them during the class. Students have also noticed that people are wearing masks the proper way and following all other guidelines, which makes everyone feel safe, so that's great. And last but not least, students just love being in person because they get that social aspect of school. They can see their teachers, friends, which is just like so good during this pandemic. It really raised our emotional health. And Desert Mountain is online, but this presentation was done when we had in person, and people didn't want to go back online. There were many responses saying that because they thought that this system and schedule was working really well because they could juggle their 3 periods and learning for that and doing assignments, as well as doing their extracurriculars such as clubs, sports, and work. So moving on to what are some things that are not going so well. Some EDL students feel left out and not being paid as much attention to by teachers as in-person students get, and they're basically left to learn passively, which they feel is detrimental to their learning, and that is true. And many students also indicated that they're experiencing high levels of stress because they're having a lot of work, and the social aspect of school is missing for a lot of people because we have a lack of social events. There's also the complaint that when we were in person, not all teachers had their students sanitize the desks, which made students feel unsafe. And last but not least, students indicated that running clubs online has been really hard because there's not so much room to have in-person events. And this aspect of school is something that's treasured by all of us who are part of clubs, which were most of the respondents on the survey. If we could move on to the next slide with challenges and recommendations. Thank you. So I basically divided this up into challenges and recommendations to combat those challenges. So there's just so much uncertainty with everything, and students just don't want more change. Throughout all these different learning systems we've had, we went with EDL and then we went in person. Now we're back to EDL at Desert Mountain. People just want one thing to be held constant, and that would be the schedule. People like having those 3 classes a day. As I said, it helps them learn material better, and it's just more safe with next semester and things not really, we don't know how things are going to go. So it would just be held constant, and people would prefer that 3-period schedule. And another significant population of students also said that the EDL students especially said there were a lot of platforms being used by teachers and they get confused, and this would be solved by having all teachers use one platform for their classes. Google Classroom and Zoom were pretty popular. Students are also confused on what teachers expect from them on assignments, especially in EDL. And our recommendation for this would be to establish better communication between teachers and students so that students aren't feeling so overwhelmed with all of their work. And another huge challenge is students are missing that, they're experiencing a lack of motivation, which is truly compounded by the lack of social events we have. And our sincere recommendation for that and true hope is that schools can find a way to uplift student spirits and increase social connections. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Board members, do you have any questions for Sonia?
Sorry.
Board Member Greenberg.
Apologies. Could you repeat again what the platforms were that students enjoyed using the most or found the easiest to use for the EDL?
People prefer Google Classroom for their assignments, and Zoom has been really user-friendly because I would say that Teams has a lot more glitches than Zoom has, like from what I've experienced and also survey responses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? All right. Caroline?
And our last school today is Coronado, and Anisha Anderson will be representing them as their senator.
Good evening, everyone. Could you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I sent out the survey and I got 88 responses. Reason being because the week before Thanksgiving, I got sent home to do temporary EDL for quarantine. So as I got back yesterday, I just sent out the survey the same. So what's going well here at Coronado? 70.5% believe that the school year is going good. And when I asked the question about the 3 points of pride for Coronado, the highest one was academics. And another thing going well is the students prefer three classes a day schedule for next semester because they have the opportunity now to finish their homework or get the extra help they need from their teachers, and the teachers are able to finish the lesson plan. Another good thing is the athletes here at Coronado, they said that they have the opportunity to play the sports they like and they enjoy being able to play football since football season ended last week. Another thing that's not going well is the projects and the schoolwork is difficult, both in person and EDL. And the EDL and in-person workload is totally different, and I can agree with that because when I was on temporary EDL for the time being, geometry, the stuff that the teacher was teaching us in geometry was totally different from what I saw when I came back to school yesterday. Because when I came back to school yesterday, I was confused and I didn't really know what to do. And another thing is the students are losing motivation in learning in school sports. They feel like being there worried about COVID, they feel like they don't feel the motivation to learn or the motivation to do anything because they're worried about their families and worried about not getting sick. So that's why I feel like we should have live sessions, school events, as the previous senator said that the students are having problems with the school spirit and not having clubs in person and sports. I feel like we should do live events showing school spirit, for example, live prep assemblies, so to let the kids know and the students know that they don't need to be worried. Another problem is the students are worried about getting sick and getting their families sick. While reading the survey, one particular response got me concerned because that student said that their mother is sick and they're actually risking their life and risking her life to come to school to learn. So let's move on to the recommendations. While reading the survey, kids were saying, majority of the kids of Coronado were saying that 3 class periods for next semester should be a thing. And the live stream EDL for the students who are online, so they feel like they're in class with their peers and they get the one-on-one time with their teacher. Another recommendation is having distance school events and live stream events to make sure the students feel the motivation and school spirit. Another recommendation is the teachers and adults should realize that the students are overwhelmed. The students feel like the teachers, basically, they feel like they don't really care. They don't really show the sympathy and stuff, realizing that they're going through the same thing that they're going through during this pandemic. Another recommendation is making sure the students have the opportunity to play sports and attend clubs in person. Since there's clubs and sports happening here at Coronado, the students enjoy it, and from the comments and the responses from the survey, the athletes at the football team, they actually enjoyed football season, and the volleyball players actually enjoyed volleyball season. Another recommendation is students in the survey mentioned different methods of social distancing in the hallways and classrooms. The students feel like the teachers aren't really strict with the health guidelines in class, so they suggest that the teachers should actually, every class period, wipe the desk off and sanitize their classroom before every student come in. And that's all I have for you today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Board members, any questions that we have for Nisha? We don't have any questions. Thank you very much, and I hope you don't end up being sick since you're in quarantine. I hope it's almost over for you. But thank you for presenting today. Caroline?
You're welcome.
So next, I just wanted to share some more next steps with what we have in plan. So the school senators will meet with the principal and their designated leadership teams. We can hopefully share the survey results with the schools, teachers, and staff so they can see it for themselves. We will continue to collaborate with the staff and district departments for process of improvement, and the SAB will continue to hold their monthly meetings with the district administration to further improve everything and make student education and experience all the better. So, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And I just want to say,
I have one
Yeah.
a comment to make. Just a thought. I know only 88 students from Coronado had the opportunity to respond. I didn't know if that could continue to be open so that you could get maybe a better response rate from Coronado. That might be helpful to you, because just because we presented tonight doesn't mean that the information that you'd receive within the next, by Friday, that you couldn't use. So that's one option, or even for the other schools if you wanted to get more. The other comment I wanted to make is a follow-up. We would love to have you come back in, maybe February, and let us know how your meetings went and what you were able to resolve, or maybe if there had to be compromises, because there's always compromises and everything, and share that with the governing board. We'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Vice President Beckman.
This is more of a question for Dr. Sacco. So regarding the Student Advisory Board, I so appreciate it, as I've said. Have we ever considered expanding it or kind of doing a subset of it, maybe for a report to the governing board like once a year or something? I would like to hear, not necessarily from a special education student or gifted student, but maybe some sort of representation of how school is going for that subset of students. It's definitely a different lens right now in this pandemic, so something to consider, because personally I would kind of like to know.
That's a good point. Board Member Greenberg.
Thank you. So kind of looking over these and then thinking back to Chaparral's presentation the other night, it seems like the top three recommendations from the Student Advisory Board across the spectrum is to maintain the 3-period class schedule, for teachers to use the same platform, to address the workload issues, provide kind of flexibility on that scheduling, and then I'll give it a 3A, mental health awareness and helping with the social emotional aspect. Would that be a fair description, that those are really the top three things? If we could focus on something, those are the key items there? Is that fair?
We can agree with that.
For the same platform, we initially, I believe in March, the recommendation was from the IT team that we use Microsoft Teams because that had been set up, and we had asked our staff to do that, but that use of the same platform, I think, fell through, and everybody wanted to use something different. Would it be possible, perhaps doing another survey before next semester starts with students and staff to narrow that down and get it to perhaps, a Zoom or a Google Classroom so that it is a unified approach?
We can definitely have those conversations. Part of the reason why we ended up where we were is that you have staff members who feel more comfortable using one tool or the other, and even with the student feedback, whether it's Google Classroom or Zoom, you have different preferences. So yes, I think we can have the conversation, just recognize that it won't be a uniform. When we land on one tool, you'll hear from the people who really don't like that tool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious if providing uniformity is, even if it's something that some people say, I really don't like using it, if that is better overall than the confusion caused by different staff members using different items.
I think the other part that might be different in the second semester is that EDL will be live synchronous. And so that changes the conversation from what we've been doing in this first semester. And so then if you think about what EDL teachers at the elementary might be looking at, for example, maybe this isn't the same issue or concern. So if in one classroom the teacher and the students are fine with Zoom, in another classroom they're fine with Teams, and in the third they're fine with, in that classroom it might work. I think for high school students, when you have all of the different classes with different teachers, it's that toggling between different platforms. And so this might get resolved by the restructuring of how we deliver EDL and in person next semester.
Right. I mean, I assume we're talking about the high schools here and not the others. But if I'm not mistaken, I apologize. I'm not sure if they're still on the call, but I think one of the specific statements had to do with the assignment turning in, that it's a single place to turn in your assignments for Google Classroom. Was that the comment?
So what I meant by that was that Google Classroom is usually a more organized platform to turn in assignments. A lot of teachers have used Google Classroom even before the pandemic. So I would say that students are more familiar with Google Classroom than turning in assignments on Microsoft Teams. Because I have one class that I have to turn in my assignments through Microsoft Teams and one through Canvas and everything else through Google Classroom.
Right, so that's, I guess
Like
that's.
personally.
Yeah, so I guess, if the streaming is going to be done largely at the high school level at a uniform place, to also perhaps match up the assignment system as well. But I think the 3-period schedule, we can discuss in just a minute here. And then the workload, I'm sure Melissa Sakos and Dr. Sakos will review that with our principals and the student advisory board. So hopefully we can create some flexibility there and make that a little easier for everybody. But thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it again. Thank you.
But before you all go, there's a couple more questions.
just a
Vice
follow-up.
President Beck.
Just to follow up on what Board Member Greenberg said, I would be interested to know, I know there's survey fatigue, but from the student's perspective, the ease of use is very important to me. So from a platform, I would be curious, just from a single survey question, of knowing what platform the students find the easiest to use. Because I know they can be difficult, and many times even my own daughters, I will see, she thinks she turns in an assignment, and I get a note back from the teacher, she didn't receive it, it didn't get entered, and so there is this toggling around. So again, I keep giving suggestions, but it would be interesting to me to find out universally what our kids prefer to use, what is easiest for them.
Board Member Greenberg.
That's what she said is perfect. That was exactly my point, but much more articulate, so I really appreciate that. The other thing noted that you both have raised is with that, the live streaming, because I know we do, just like we have with the platforms, we have staff members who in the past, and I don't know if this is still a concern anymore, if we're beyond this, but have expressed that concern with live streaming, but it seems very clear based on the student preference, the information that you've all presented over these past 2 meetings, that live streaming is in fact something that you would really appreciate and that would be helpful for your EDL colleagues, correct? So there's a clear demand and desire for that, and I just want that to be emphasized. But yeah, I thank you for articulating that much better than I did. I appreciate it.
So is Buzz just not being used anymore? Or we
I've
haven't
never
really had that
touched
follow-up.
Buzz.
So I can talk on this since I'm
Okay.
an SOL student. Buzz is what we turn in, but today, for example, I had a DBA, and every teacher has a different format for a DBA. One, I have to calendar, and then I had to call on Teams, but I didn't know that, but I called the number, and everyone has a different use. I have a teacher that gives you a Zoom link 15 minutes before that. I have another teacher that uses Teams. I have one that calls you. So the DBA is just, we want students to just have the ability just to go, I'm going to have a Zoom link, or I'm going to go on a Teams, or I'm going to get a call, and just kind of more simplify it, because I have to look at, every time I have to look at the requirements for a DBA, I have to go, did I do this, did I do that, and just gets really complex when I have 5 in the day.
All right, thank you. Can I ask another question? On the DBA, is that exclusive to Seoul, or DBAs, are they being handled as an
It's a-
assessment through EDL as well?
Yes, or what?
No?
Are we doing discussion-based assessment in EDL? I thought it was only
No.
Scottsdale Online.
It's only
Yeah.
from my experience.
Only on Scottsdale Line. And is that the final assessment? So there are no tests, there are quizzes, and then you do is it database assessment?
It's a database, it's a discussion-based assessment,
Discussion-based
and it's done
assessment.
throughout the course to check in with the student to see if on each module, for example, you'll have 5
Your median.
modules in a SOL course, and after the end of each module, they will have a DBA with their teacher, because some of these kids can do the modules on their own and don't necessarily check in regularly. It is kind of a checks and measures to make sure that the teacher touches base with the student, covers the material, asks them a few questions, and they do it maybe 3-4 times.
So can I ask from a student perspective, how do you feel that these assessments provide your teacher and yourself a quality assessment of what you have learned?
For me, for example, I feel good with it because My Spanish teacher gives us a guideline of what we're going to be asked, but some of my other teachers, they just kind of go, we're going to talk about the whole module. Well, I don't know what to study. I have all the papers in front of me, so I'm, looking through all of them, and I get a couple questions wrong. But for some students, they're just better with studying and doing a paper and pen test, where I'm good with reading materials because I do speech and debate, and that helps me remember the materials and be ready to answer questions. So it's just hard for some students to do that when they're not used to it and there's no guideline of what you're going to be asked.
So the guidelines are a little teacher-specific.
Yeah, my Spanish teacher does it, but other teachers don't. Some teachers do group calls to do a DBA, and so every DBA is different from the other one.
Well, thank you, because I think that feedback for our SOL department will be very valuable. So thank you very much.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, go ahead, Caroline.
I said just thank you for listening to our presentations.
Okay, and I think Dr. Menzel had some comments.
So I want to thank the students. Thank you, Caroline and Trex, and everyone else who presented this evening, those who were with us virtually and in the room. You can see why we're very proud and why it's so important to elevate the student perspective. I think one of the things that stood out to me in this review is we didn't lead the students in the questions that were asked to your colleagues. No one said, do you want to keep the 3-period day? What's working well, what's not working well? They were open-ended questions, and what you see surface in the response is an authentic response from our students. And so we're really grateful. We'll make better decisions as a result of your input, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was cheering for the students, not me. All right, thank you. We'll go on to discussion item B, fiscal year 2021-22 budget calendar. And Shannon Crozier, and I'm so glad, Shannon, you're not at the complete end of the day this time.
I know.
Got our attention.
Be nice to her because she's got a boot.
I have a little fun walking through here. Well, Board Member Beckman, or President Beckman, members of the board, and Dr. Menzel and guests, tonight we're just looking at a calendar for the budget preparation for next year. It's kind of weird to start thinking so early. We're not even halfway through this year. The purpose of that is we have in our board policy that says the superintendent has to basically direct us to do the annual budget and looking at what all is involved with that. But part of it also says that we have to establish and publish a budget process that allows and encourages our employees and our stakeholders to have participation in that. So this is kind of the first look at that, so people are aware that this is a process that will be starting up soon. To make sure that we're getting public and employee involvement opportunities, because of COVID, last year we did two meetings, but because of COVID, it's a little bit harder to do those in-person meetings. So we have scheduled to do a virtual town hall on January 21st at 5:30, and more information will come out about that and how to people can connect to that. We have new tools this year that I think will really enhance this process. One being the Let's Talk, which we already have a budget option on there for Let's Talk. And then the other one being Thought Exchange, which will allow people to have an opportunity to put those ideas out there of what are the priorities, what are the things we really need to focus on for our upcoming budget. And this just kind of looks at the calendar of when we'll be doing things. We'll come back to January 19th with the early estimates of what we think maintenance and operations, capital override, and our district additional assistance will look like. We'll have that community virtual town hall on January 21st. On February 2nd, we'll come back for another review and implement or provide the information of what we've gotten back from our community through Let's Talk, the virtual town hall, and Thought Exchange. Then on February 16th, we'll do a review of the proposed salary schedules for next year. And this is a new part. We've never brought employee benefits. It's usually been in a handbook that went to the governing board. But this year, we'd like to bring employee benefits up so that everybody is aware of the entire compensation package, not just salary. This gets a little bit tight in here with March 2nd being the tentative approval of the maintenance and operation budget. And the big key part for that is because we like to get our contracts out to our teachers early. All school districts kind of do a fight to see who can get those out the first to retain our teachers. And so that will go on March 2nd. At that same time will also be the approval of the salary schedules. and employee benefits, and then authorization to issue those contracts. April 20th would then be the approval of the capital budgets. And then June 8th is when we do the proposed budget, and the 22nd being the public hearing and the adoption of the budget for next year. So with that, if there's any questions, and we know some of these dates, these are the dates we're shooting for. We think we'll be able to keep all of those, but if something comes up with the state, we might have to make some adjustments, but those are the dates that we're looking forward for next year's budget preparation.
Did you have a comment?
I was just going
Dr.
to
Menzel?
add, I appreciate what Shannon put together here, and I just want to say, part of what I think we can do in Let's Talk and Thought Exchange and in the virtual conversations is to really identify, a lot of our budget is fixed. We know that 85% of our budget is tied up in staff salaries and compensation, but there are budgetary priorities that we can consider as a district. And so putting some of those things out there and asking the community to prioritize. We know we can't do everything, so do you prefer, if you rank order the list of options, how important is it to maintain specialty programs versus how important is it to lower class sizes versus, we've got all of these things. Asking the community to rank order and prioritize would help inform the budgeting process. I think we can use these tools to help gather that feedback.
And I appreciate that, Dr. Menzel, because we've had several conversations that in the past, the budget's been pretty much set. And when we've gone out, we tell the public what it is, and we really aren't taking that feedback and then changing anything. And because you can't just open it up, that you do need to narrow that down, but want to value that feedback. Dr. Menzel came up with this idea of prioritizing and ranking. And I think that will be, can try it and see how it works, and then maybe, move on to getting more participation from our stakeholders and our employees.
Can you state the date again for the town hall?
Oh, for the town hall, January 21st. Yes, so it's, I believe that's a Thursday, so it'll be shortly after that the early estimates. It'll be shortly after that board meeting, same week.
So once again, going on the theme of Vice President Beckman, to over-communicate when that is coming about, how, if they can't make that meeting, that it'll be in the Let's Talk or in some other format on the website, and obviously giving plenty of time to be able to answer those questions. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Any other questions from board members?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, we'll be moving on to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as, well, it's going to be as amended. There was also one note in the item, I think it was 5C, but did that get updated, the number?
It did get updated in the board packet.
Okay, but I don't think it was given within the 24-hour notice, so I just wanted to make note of it on consent agenda item C. The actual funding dollar amount was, I believe, it was $54,042 instead of the $50,000. And it's up to that dollar amount depending upon if the bandwidth is needed. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. Do we have a motion then to approve the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
Vice President Beckman moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
Board Member Greenberg seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, then we will move on to the polled item, which is 5B. Let me pull that up. So 5B is approval of revisions to middle school and high school planning guides for 2021-22 school year. And Board Member Greenberg, if you'd like to begin the discussion.
First of all, let me just state that this comes out of a place of ignorance because we've all been busy with a million things, myself included, and so this just isn't an issue I've really focused on. But we continue to receive emails from a member of our community stating and making various assertions about the inaccuracy of the planning guide in relation to one of our schools. And I know some of my colleagues on the board know much more about this issue than I do, but I just want clarification as to whether those assertions are accurate, are inaccurate, whether we've communicated with this member from the community to make sure that we've addressed her concerns, just some background information so I can be, I guess, know more about the situation.
Dr. Menzel, do you have a response?
Sure. So I have a meeting with the principal of Ingleside on Friday to gather more information, and I've had a chance to look at some of the history. So I think there are a couple of, if you want to separate the conversation, I mean, you're looking at a course guide, and not every school offers every course that's in the course guide. So it's really the template for that conversation. And then specialty schools may have certain courses that are offered, but not offered at other places. And so it's written to be broader. I'm not sure, given everything that I've heard, and Dr. Guerin could weigh in, and I don't know if Cheryl Redner's available, but from what I've heard, there are two things that happen. One, I don't think that approval of this forgoes a consideration of what's the structure at Ingleside. I think those are two separate conversations. And it's my understanding that the course guide gets amended often in April with a final course list. So this is the preliminary template, and then there's an amendment that happens in April before we have the final. So at least as to my understanding, I think that the concerns that have been expressed relate to the 5-period day at Ingleside and the lack of electives that students can choose. Our course guide has all of the electives. Those are, to me, two separate conversations, and I don't understand why they're perceived to be coupled.
Okay. I don't know if Dr. Karen has anything to add.
Thank you. Absolutely accurate. I have nothing to add.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that that I understood the issues here.
Vice President Beckman.
To Board Member Greenberg's point, we discussed this last year as well, but Dr. Menzel, you weren't here. And the concern does center around the electives. Because you're telling us tonight that this is a preliminary template, right, of the planning guide, and that there is the final that's going to be approved later? Is that what you're saying?
I understand that it's typically amended in April so that some adjustments are made. I don't know what's been included in that. I just understand that that's a normal process.
I guess my question is if we were to approve this tonight, you subsequently have a meeting with Ingleside and our community member that may have concerns to gain more understanding. If there is a needed revision, can that be done before we approve the final? Because I won't feel comfortable voting on it unless I know that conversation surrounding those concerns has been had.
So Vice President Beckman, I can't imagine that anything from that conversation would change anything in the planning guide, because the planning guide is for all schools, not a specific schedule. All the electives are in there. Different schools offer different electives. So the approval would not preclude the school from offering something or not offering something. It's driven by a schedule of how many periods they offer per day. And Ms. Redner is available for questions, but sometimes there are changes, and so it's a little bit more of a cleanup in the spring if there is a change that we want to make a revision. It's usually very minor. This is the major approval that allows scheduling to begin, which is really important. And I know it seems strange that we're planning for spring planning because of the pandemic, but we also have to continue to do the work for next year. Ms. Redner, did I leave anything out?
Good evening. No, you're spot on all points. Thank you. It's a catalog, exactly what they said, for the entire district. And we do have different differences on each campus. The students choose those classes. They are two different conversations. Dr. Menzel and Dr. Guerin are exactly spot on. As far as coming back in the spring, we've had different reasons to come back in the spring. For example, sometimes there may be something different, for example, with CTE or with AVID, something beyond our control that we just bring back as an addendum. No major changes. But if something comes up, we definitely can do it. But the schools are ready to start registration for 21-22.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I'm not insinuating that there will be a needed change. I am just saying that there's been some admitting to not knowing all the facts surrounding this concern. So while I don't anticipate that there would be a needed change, and I'm confident in voting forward tonight, given that you said it's not locked in for sure, I just want to make sure that that conversation happens so that, we feel comfortable understanding all of the concerns around it.
Thank you.
Board Member Kravitz.
I just wanted to point out that since Ingleside changed their model, I think that was when Dr. Thuman was the principal a few years ago, that the school did change from a C-rated school to an A-rated school. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Redner or Dr. Guerin, but I believe that is the case. So I just wanted for people who care about such things, whether that they should be aware of that situation as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I also have a couple of concerns regarding it. More of a general comment, but I believe it was mentioned that in the past, we actually had the schools that, and I'll just, we have the course, and now we don't say what schools they're offered at on the planning guide. Is that correct? In the past, we did have the schools. And I don't understand, maybe there was a good reason for the change. If somebody can tell me why we wouldn't want to have the schools on there, because to me, the planning guide is a tool for the parents and the students, and it would be so helpful to know if my school offered that course. So is there really a good reason of not putting the schools on the planning guide?
So I believe Ms. Redner has more of a historical perspective. I have an understanding that I think hers has more depth.
That's a great question. So it's gone back and forth in my time in this particular position. The thought is that courses are open for any campus for the most part, except those unique courses, those IB courses, of course. But they're open, and then depending on which classes actually fill, those are the classes that go forward. So it's gone back and forth again in my time here, offering specific courses. The principals at the middle level, I spoke to several today, they're in the process of designing their registration forms, and they're going to be particular in those course descriptions there.
So
and that's typically around electives, for example. Every middle school is going to offer middle school courses.
So really, for students and parents, we don't have one resource. What you have to do is you can go to the planning guide, which will give you the course, and then you have to go to your school registration form or some other school source to see what is actually offered.
So,
right, so course offerings show on the registration forms.
Right. So the only way a parent, if I would know what course that is being offered, then or you could go to your registration form, see what's being offered, and then use your planning guide as giving a more detailed description of that course so you could understand it.
so we have a couple of SUSD parents here, but as a high school parent myself, somewhere else, I really like to have the specific form from the school because it's easy, it's simple, it's particular to my school. I don't have to go through the course guide and try to figure out what is relevant to my son's high school. So I have right here all the list, and then if I want to dive deeper and get more additional information on that particular elective, I can go in and look in the course guide. So we've done it both ways. This seems to simplify it, and parents, let me know if I'm wrong.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand. I was under the impression the planning guide was kind of the source that you go to if you're going to be picking your classes, but it's really not. It's not used that way anymore. Okay. Board Member Greenberg. Oh, sorry. That's
all right. It's hard. I'm sorry. I just want to jump in and say, just because the course is offered doesn't mean that it always makes. It depends on how many students sign up for that particular course.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons that was removed.
Okay. And that's the case if you're just looking at the registration of the school as well. Because if
Right,
that-
and also in some of our middle schools, I'm sorry, they offer a wheel, so that changes, and we had that conversation when I was there, where they might offer quarter courses, and so we want to give as many opportunities as possible, especially, well, in both middle and high school. So we want to keep that as wide open as possible in the catalog.
Okay, Board Member Greenberg.
Yeah, I think the merger between that is whether you have, I guess, in a sense, students or parents who would choose to go to a different school if they knew that that school did have something on offer that the school they had in their mind that they were going to go to, the predetermined school, did not. And so you think of those specialized courses like CMAS at Arcadia High School or the Math and Sciences Academy at Saguaro or those things. And so maybe, I mean, I was actually, when we had this discussion last time, I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool if you can go online and you can click, oh, these are the courses I'm most interested in, and we had like a 90% match system, like, this school tends to have 90% of what you're looking for, or whatever. That might take a little bit of computer programming, but I think that might be that merger, that connection point of the two documents in a sense.
Well, and actually it would be 5 documents, right? Let's say you're picking high schools, you'd have to have all 5
Right.
registrations for the high school, figure out which ones had the most of what you were looking for. You can't just go to our planning guide and look at it.
Right, and so that was the question, is like, could you create a tool that addresses that, where obviously we know the classes aren't necessarily going to be filled just because they're on offer, but the mere fact that they're on offer, if you had known, I was going to go to Arcadia, but I didn't know that there was an IB program, because we are a pretty big district geographically, and there are a lot of things as a student at Arcadia I had no knowledge of at Chaparral or Coronado, or I didn't even know there was an IB program at Desert Mountain until I think I was a junior, and I might have gone to Desert Mountain for
Right.
that. So that's, that I think is maybe something we could, some sort of tool. I don't know how many families, to be fair, and how many students are that way, but it would be probably a cool tool to develop if we could.
Yeah, and that may be a good assignment for one of our coding classes.
Yeah. Put our students to work.
There should be an app for
Which will
that.
have to
App
be in
for
the
that.
high school planning guide.
Yep.
I'm copywriting that right now.
Okay.
Well, you're welcome to come teach it if you'd like. I just want to make sure that we understand it's a reference tool for all of our schools. So it's a reference and it's wide open. And I talked about this last time, our counselors do a phenomenal job of reaching to the previous school. So if we're bringing up into middle school, for example, down to their elementary schools, and making sure they're communicating with families as well as particular students about what is available at their school. You're absolutely right. If you're a student at Arcadia, you may not be familiar with what's offered at Desert Mountain just because of distance, but our counselors do a nice job of communicating and making those offers available.
The course guide also provides consistency district-wide to get the counselors, principals, assistant principals, and teachers in the room and to talk about what classes we have, what courses we have, and what consistency we have. It's so important in such a large district.
Okay. So it's really also a resource for our employees and staff. So the other questions that were asked at the last meeting, and I don't know that we got the answers yet, were surrounding the pre-AP courses and what they were replacing and how that was going to be different and affect the students. Were you able to come up with those questions? Was the all AP English going to replace regular English at the high schools?
Not district-wide. And Cheryl, go ahead. I know you had additional information on this.
So it's going to be dependent on the particular school if they offer the course. And we know that, for example, at Coronado, Melinda Spletek had a chance to talk to us. They will be offering the courses at Coronado. I believe some of our other schools are starting to talk about that as well. So it's a framework. It's not a curriculum. But if that school is not going to be offering pre-AP English in this case, they're going to be offering the regular English on their campus.
It requires training and to go through a process to be approved to offer it. So it is not district-wide. It's a program that a school, a principal, and the teachers with community input, I could see a site council talking about that and making that decision as well, parent groups.
So it doesn't change the planning guide at this point either, because it is just an option. Okay. And the pre-AP's just been added because it's an option. All right. Any
Correct.
other questions? All right, thank you very much. Well, do we have a motion to vote to approve the revisions to the planning guide for the 2021-22 school year?
So moved.
Board Member Greenberg moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
Board Member Perlberg seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. Action item A, update on instructional model for spring semester. Dr. Menzel, would you like to begin?
So as you recall, we approved a learning model for second semester that was predicated on a return to learn that would have 5 full days of instruction and a typical 6-period day if we think about secondary or whatever was typical for the secondary at the time. The committee that Dr. Guerin led prepared that recommendation, was brought forward, that included a Plan B for if conditions in the community didn't allow for that everyday 6-period day when we returned. We realized we needed something between that schedule and all online because we know how important in-person learning is. And so at the time, we approved a Plan B that was a hybrid with 50% of the students on campus 2.5 days a week, the other 50% the other 2.5 days a week. As you know, hybrids in Scottsdale don't mix really well. And so we got a lot of feedback. Dr. Guerin is here to present the outcome of that review based on that input, and you heard much of it tonight from the students as well. So Dr. Guerin, I'd like to invite you to present the outcome of the revision to Plan B.
Thank you, Madam President, governing board members, Dr. Menzel, and Ms. Wagner. It was so appropriate and wonderful to hear from the students because several of the changes have already been adopted, and there were some new ideas that I'm excited to bring back to the committee. So to hear from the students who are living through the decisions that we make all together, it was fabulous to hear that. And I just have to mention the student that was a virtual, Samya. She was on our summer Return to Learn committee. So she spent June, July, and August with all of us developing the original in-person hybrid and online, Scottsdale Online. So it was great to see her again. We have some very talented students. So I want to start with the current elementary model. So the current elementary model is a full day, 5 days a week in person. So when we come back in spring, if in-person learning is available, and again, this would be based on the metrics, we would continue the current elementary model with the addition of an early release day on Wednesday that I talked about at the last presentation. Maricopa County is strongly recommending that school districts keep their elementary schools open. It is the best way for our youngest learners to learn, and it needs to be a priority. We have heard from students, our littlest students with their big smiles on their faces, doing great with their maths. We've heard from our teachers, we've heard from our parents that this model is working. When we've tried to bring forward, Dr. Menzel just mentioned, I really gonna strike hybrid from my vocabulary after COVID is done. When we bring forward a hybrid at the elementary, it's problematic. So for elementary, we really have the full day or online learning at home if necessary. And we're really making a priority to keep our elementary schools open.
Excuse me, would you like to have questions regarding elementary before we move on? Or would you like to do the whole presentation before we
Probably the whole
ask?
presentation, if that's okay. And that'll give a bigger picture, if that's okay with the board. So when we talk about secondary model, there was unique challenges because of the number of students on campus, the mixing the groups of students when you have 6 different classrooms. That's very different from an elementary homeroom. 6 passing periods, arriving at school, leaving at school, lunchtime, large lunch crowds, and really the credit-bearing courses, that this is so important that we continue the rigor, that we continue the pacing, that students continue to move forward through the coursework as this has greatly impacts their future. So our shortened day this year, our 2/3, reduces the passing periods, eliminated large lunch challenges, and it provided synchronous, engaging instruction. And as we worked through this model really evolved. We saw this evolution with our talented teachers. They sought out the rigorous, really relevant professional development provided to them. Teachers are so innovative, they do whatever it takes to make it work for their students. They practice, we added cameras, other technology enhancements, and so we started to see that streaming became the way to go. That teachers were, at first, many were fearful, and do I have to stream? Is it going to be mandatory? I'm not sure that I can do both. And then all of a sudden, everyone's asking for the cameras, and we see that this is the best way to make it work in secondary. So now we have cameras everywhere, and slowly the afternoon EDL, 36 minutes, is no longer necessary when we return in January. That we will be able to offer the classes in person and at home at the same time. They'll be able to stream into their classroom. So this is going to allow us to change the model. We will be able to offer that academic support in the afternoon, that the students called it office hours. We're going to take it up a notch instead of office hours and have it be academic support. It's going to be scheduled, it's going to be defined, and it will be available. It wasn't available before because our teachers were teaching, for the most part, in person in the morning and EDL in the afternoon. So this evolution of this model opened that up. The other thing we understand and we heard from the students, and the one student spoke from the heart about putting their family member's life at risk by going to school. Our students are hurting. So we need to focus on that social, emotional support in the afternoon. It will have an opportunity to provide intervention and small group instruction. So we're really excited to get very specific and get an enhanced secondary model if we need to do this. And I really want to stress, this is a very important point. We want to lead with Plan A. Plan A is full day, 5 days a week with the half day on Wednesday because we need to honor the fact that this is extremely difficult for our teachers. Dr. Menzel, in his comments, shared that managing both is so difficult. So that 2 hours of early release on Wednesdays will help them. But we're hoping to lead with Plan A, K-12. But we understand that the metrics might not allow it, so we want to have this additional new model ready to go. And so instead of an A-B hybrid, yes, I said hybrid, where students get to go to school full day, 2.5 days a week, instead we're hearing over and over and over again the 2/3 day, as it is evolving and improving and getting more consistent, is what students and teachers and parents want. I just kept hearing that over and over and over again. So we believe instead of the A-B hybrid, which still involves lunch and 6 passing periods, and Dr. Menzel is hearing from Maricopa County that is problematic at this time with our current metrics with the lunchtime. So what's great about the 2/3 of a day is it does avoid additional passing periods and avoid the large lunchtime. And all students, both in person and EDL, will have the 73 minutes of instruction, followed by an opportunity to have academic support and intervention and office hours, upgraded academic support in the afternoon from their teachers. The other piece we heard from students, I added consistency in the slide, and we heard from students that there's so little that is consistent in their life right now, and they really like their schedule. So that's important to them to try not to make so much change. So just a refresher on what the secondary Plan B overview is and how we're going to upgrade it. It is 2/3 of a day on campus, 5 days a week, and teachers will have 2 hours on Wednesday to work together to support the dual modalities that they're supporting in-person and at-home instruction at the same time. It provides instruction for 3 class periods a day. The other thing I'm hearing is when you think about mitigation strategies, the cleaning, the getting organized, the staggering of the passing period really eats up a lot of instructional time. So if you only do it 3 times, that's less academic time, or if you have to do it 6 times, it eats up more academic time. So the thought is that this preserves more instructional time because everything just takes longer because we have to do all these things we didn't have to do before. We're really excited that EDL students would receive synchronous instruction. Our technology department is working with teaching and learning. We heard loud and clear that we need to enhance our sound systems to make sure that the in-person students and the at-home students can collaborate and communicate. Today we heard about consistency with platforms, so that's something that we can work together on as well. So what I really want to stress is the asynchronous learning during the afternoon is required. We need to look at the workload from students and be very careful about that. What we're working on right now is expectations for Plan A, for Plan B, and if we have to be virtual. And the expectations are developed by the committee. We're bringing them to the principals. The next step is we're going to invite the TILs, the teacher instructional leaders, in, because then we'll have representation from each campus and ask them to help us to define those. And tonight I asked Dr. Sakos if we could take those expectations and bring them to our student advisory board so the students can share their feedback and help us communicate the expectations so that we all have a shared understanding. As we work through these models, things come up that we haven't anticipated, where students don't want to attend the afternoon, they want to attend the morning, so we changed attendance policies. These things come up while we're rolling out new models. So the instructional leaders and the students will help us navigate and give input as we improve. The other thing we're going to ask from our site leaders, our teacher leaders, is to help with fidelity checks. So using a rubric, looking at each expectation, and articulating to each other how is it working at one campus, where can it be improved in another, in a way to have growth and guide professional development, less evaluative, more growth-minded and supportive of the model and helping it to improve. I want to note that students in special education programs will continue with the full day schedule. We do have a learning pilot going on at one of our K-8 schools that had a full day of learning for the students in 6 through 8. We're scheduling a meeting with that principal and the 3 principals from the other K-8 to talk about the strengths and the challenges with that, and if those principals and staff would be interested in expansion. So that will be wrapping up soon, and I'll be able to provide you an update soon on that. We will provide a safe place for students to learn. Secondary has already been doing this and doing it well because of the 2/3 day. Elementary schools will need to offer this on the Wednesday early release, and we will be sending out information to families before winter break so that if they need this opportunity, it will be available to them.
All right, why don't we go ahead and go back to elementary and ask our questions regarding elementary first.
Great.
Board Member Greenberg.
My only question for elementary is the same question we received. It's been answered, but I just want it on camera so that the public can deal with it and see it. Early release Wednesday, that is not something we have now. Why is it a good idea to implement it on Wednesday? 2 points. 1, what is the purpose of it? 2, why is it not on Fridays?
So the purpose is, we've heard loud and clear that navigating these learning models has been unbelievably challenging for our teachers, working morning, noon, and night. And we've seen other districts that are taking a full day for this or half days in elementary as well. So you're seeing different districts tackle it in different ways. But we believe this 2 hours of early release time will absolutely support what our teachers are attempting to do, which is reinvent their craft every day with every model, with every new challenge. And in addition, they'll be able to engage together to collaborate in professional learning communities or professional development if they choose. It's really going to be driven by them and what they need for those 2 hours. We absolutely understand that 2 hours is not going to even touch the extra time that they are spending on making all of this work. But it is a support. It is an additional support. And I think it is so very important for our teachers and what they're navigating.
And I assume as well that those teachers at all grade levels, but in elementary, will also be using that time to, if necessary, since it is teacher-driven, to work with the students who might need additional support that they and their colleagues have identified as needing that additional support.
Thank you for bringing that up. What we're asking, we are really focusing on social emotional support for that 2 hours of afternoon time. So Ms. Cron, under Dr. Sackos's guidance, they're developing some really great student supports that students can navigate during that asynchronous time. So that will be happening. We're going to ask our specialists, our social workers, to flex their time, that they would have their 2 hours of support in the morning so that they would be available for students Wednesday afternoon. So if student needs small group instruction, if they're an English language learner, they could have time with their coach. What's really great about that is so many times when we have to support students, we have to pull them out of their classroom, pull them out of Tier 1 instruction. So even though we're providing individual support, they're missing something. And in this way, they would not be. We'd be very strategic about that time. So our goal is to make it very beneficial for families, but not add one more thing, not add busy work.
And the reason for choosing Wednesday over Friday?
We seem to have less engagement. It really creates an absenteeism problem with students and student engagement. People think, oh, the weekend is just starting. And we want students to be engaged in all those resources we're supporting. So it's really important that we keep them engaged with the specialists.
Will students be able to stay on campus for the afternoon if they need that? If their parent is working, can't pick them up, they have that opportunity as well?
That is the safe place to learn, much as we did when we were all virtual fourth quarter. But this time it will be at each site. We won't be doing learning hubs like we did fourth quarter. So we will be sending out information before winter break, as soon as a week, for families to sign up if they're interested in that. And we will have prioritization categories in case we don't have the space for everyone who needs it. But we absolutely do not think that's going to be a problem. We've been absolutely able to handle any requests at the secondary level. We're getting really creative.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Perlberg.
So, sticking on that half day, or not half day, 2 hour early release, sorry. For elementary, so what I'm hearing you say is that for some of our students, possibly many of our students, there will be a mandatory component to the supports that they will need to utilize during that time specifically. Is that correct?
So most of the students will be at home. And so mandatory is a strong word, strongly encouraged, calling the parent, asking them to make sure that the student engages in a support group. We have to be sensitive to family schedules and what they need to do, but we will be providing that opportunity. We will be providing the instruction, the social emotional support. We hear from families that managing COVID, managing the pandemic is really tough, and so we want to be careful to be sensitive to working families and how they're navigating this. But if the student stays on campus and they qualify, absolutely.
I mean, I guess, and I apologize, because I feel like I'm getting a little mixed message in that I'm hearing that, for some of our students, this will be the opportunity to receive the services that they need for their academic supports. And this is the time, but if we're saying it's completely, if you happen to be there. I guess I'm just getting a little confused.
We're definitely going to be stronger than if you happen to be there. But what we heard from parents on the committee and what we hear from others, that this is extremely stressful for families. And if they're a working parent and they have to drop a student somewhere else and they're not able to get to that 45-minute of intervention support, we would then encourage them to stay on campus and try to have that intervention there. But so strongly encourage. I just don't want to add another burden. So I think that would be the exception.
I have some follow-up too, but do you have follow-up to
Is
this?
the issue that we're categorizing it as a half-day on campus, so we can't force, I guess maybe now I'm a little confused. We have to have the afternoon component, correct, legally, for the elementary, or no? Is those instructional minutes necessary?
So we actually already meet the instructional
Okay.
minutes. So we had a robust discussion around this. I heard loud and clear from the parents on the committee that if I have to hurry and pick up my student, and then I have to hurry home and get them on the computer, and then I have to do A, B, and C with them,
Right.
please do not do that.
Okay.
So we want to be sensitive to what families are going through right now and the stress they're navigating and potential illness they're navigating. On the other hand, we want to make the content and what's available so good that they're gonna want it. How can I get in? My kid might need it too. But we really heard loud and clear from families that if we started tracking their every minute engagement in these resources, that it would be a really hard burden on our elementary families. So we wanted to be sensitive to that. And we talked to Dr. Bachna at length, and we meet the instructional minutes. Do we think most of our students are going to engage? Yes. Are we going to strongly encourage it? Absolutely. But we want to be careful to be sensitive and listen to what our families need.
Okay, sorry, that explains it much better. So the only other aspect then is the students who do specific, that a teacher working individually or with his or her colleagues determines that, ooh, this fourth grade student, we really need to provide additional support to. Will that student be required then to stay on for the extra 2 hours to work in whatever additional service we're providing? Or is it saying, we really think you need the service, here's what we're willing to offer you, and then the student or the parents says, whatever, and they ignore it anyways? Is that?
So secondary has that
Well,
hour.
but I'm talking about elementary.
So but what, I just want to show the difference, because elementary is full day. We're only talking about 2 hours. So
Right.
if a family doesn't access it, we can provide it during the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I mean, there's options. We're
okay.
flexible with families. Secondary, you're going to have this opportunity every day with that academic support because of the 2/3 day.
Okay, so the main
Yeah.
focus then, at the elementary level of the half-day, elementary is the ability for the staff to work with one another and collaborate on these issues, build out their plans, make sure that their lessons are adapting to the scenarios, depending on, obviously we're dealing with unprecedented times, the ability to cover other classes, all of that. That is, at the elementary level, the main focus of this.
Actually, absolutely, Board Member Greenberg. And
Okay.
because if a student needs help, we're not going to only help them on Wednesday afternoon in the 2 hours. It's going to be ongoing.
Right, okay.
We're just going to use it as an opportunity.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Dr. Guerin, I believe Dr. Hagi would like to add something.
Please.
I also wanted to add that it's not just for the teachers. We also know that our students need that social emotional support, and student services under the guidance of Shannon Cron and Dr. Sackos are providing those lessons that we know our students need. And also regarding to the academic piece, Dr. Guerin is saying exactly what we're doing in the other days. That being said, you remember the Beyond Move On When reading that Margaret Cerna was able to pilot over the summer. We're excited to bring some of those aspects back specific to right now our Title I setting and perhaps maybe expand it. But again, it's still under that pilot piece, but we know that the tutoring was very effective and very well received by our families, where our qualitative data, that soft data shared, that our students were motivated by having that adult in that small group tutoring piece. So there's more to come. I just wanted you to know that, there's a lot of efforts being made to be able to support our students during those 2 hours, along with what our teachers are getting, which is the ability to collaborate and really plan and prepare for the situations that we're in right now, because our students, some are falling behind because of our circumstances, and so it allows us to comb through the data and really prescribe the pieces that they need. So I just wanted to chime in, just specific to elementary, because I do believe that it's going to be able to support our teachers, but also support our students in a way that we typically can't under regular circumstances. So this is truly a silver lining for us.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that.
So what I'm hearing, let me make sure I'm hearing this correctly. If I'm in elementary, I will be having an option as an elementary student to continue and stay at school on Wednesday afternoon, because you will be providing supports, whether it's academic or social or emotional, for at least those 2 hours at the school. And then those students will have structured time, whether it be with a counselor or they're, a pullout with English language, or if it's a special program, for third grade reading. But it will be structured with a professional, not just sitting at the cafeteria doing homework.
My understanding is that we're looking at it both for in-person and EDL, and again, those details are still being worked out. Our goal is to provide the support regardless of where the student is. Some families are going to need to get their student because they have other responsibilities, maybe to another sibling, but our goal truly is to find the student wherever they are and meet them, whether it's in an EDL model or it's in person. We want things to really work out, especially for those students that need those interventions.
So therefore, we will be providing transportation twice. We will be providing it at
No, and I'll turn it
after
over
the 2
to-
hours
Let me
and
jump in.
prior to.
Let me jump in. Okay, so the safe place to learn that is required by the governor's order is in fact not instruction. It's a safe place for students to learn,
Right.
and they can engage in asynchronous instruction. So that is not going to
That's
necessarily change. What the students will be doing is engaging in this emotional intelligence, social emotional support curriculum to help them. Select students that qualify or need Title I support, English language support, they're behind in reading, they're behind in math. They can be serviced at that time either from home or if they happen to be an in-person student. So we'll have to work out the details, work out the numbers. That might be individual to each site because many students are going to go home, but we'll have them jump back on. And Ms. Cerna has found really great ways to provide reading intervention through computers, including even oral reading fluency, and it's been really impressive. So I can't say with specificity because it depends on how many students want to stay. If those students that want to stay are students that qualify for the service, so it's going to be mixed.
Okay, but if those students do stay, they will have to find their own transportation home, as well as students who are there for the governor's safety class, if you will, or space. They will also have to find their own way home.
The students that are going to receive the support, for the most part, would be receiving it from home.
No, not the support.
The safe place to
The
learn.
safe place to learn
is-
will have to have their own I just want to
Yeah.
be very clear.
And that was the case when
That
we
was the
when we
case
started
before,
it,
but I just want to make it sure it's still the case. So it's sounding like majority of this will be handled online. So if I just have a student that's not in that group, do you know what, is this 10, 15% of the kids? Is it?
So it's small at the secondary level, except for a few middle
No, at
schools, Dr.
elementary
Sakos.
level.
At elementary, we haven't had it since fourth quarter or the beginning of the school year.
Okay.
And we had it at hubs, not at the individual sites
schools.
at
Okay.
elementary. So it's going to be interesting to see. And again, it's once a week for 2 hours, so we'll
Right.
have to see.
But what is the percentage of students who would qualify for these special programs and academic support?
That's going to vary by school depending if they're a Title I school, they're going to have more Title I specialists, more intervention teachers. And so they would be able to offer additional support when a different school might not have as many. It might be a smaller school, a larger school, might have a larger English, students learning English population. So the way we provide interventions absolutely varies by school dependent on student need, and this would be the same. We're not changing any of that. We're just using this opportunity to not have to pull them out of the classroom for it.
And did we offer the social emotional learning component virtually this semester to elementary students?
That is embedded in any teacher's classroom. We haven't done it as a district-wide support. I mean, I better let Dr. Sakos answer that because it's been really robust through her
Well,
department.
I'll tell you where I'm going with it. So I am wondering what the participation rate was so that we could compare the participation rate of this semester if we were going to be offering it on Wednesdays for, I don't know if it was a full 2 hours, but an hour and a half. And so I wanted to see what we were anticipating the participation rate to be for that Wednesday.
Board President, we would need to gather that data specifically from our elementary campuses, and just going back to a recent presentation from Ms. Cron, we would be looking at the implementation and delivery of our Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 supports. So Tier 1 would specifically be the embedded curriculum, social emotional curriculum such as Sanford Harmony. Our Tier 2 is our student assistance program groups that's offered from a contracted vendor, Jewish Family Children's Services. And then Tier 3, of course, is that individual. So that would be data that we would need to collect. We do have the data collected from JFCS, but we would have to work with elementary principals and the teachers to find out, have they been able to embed Sanford Harmony with fidelity?
I think that the data would be very interesting and beneficial to us to know. Board Member Greenberg.
I guess with I'm a pretty firm believer that we need to give our staff members the planning time and the collaboration time and the time to be able to, have these really teacher-driven discussions and work time. I think, it's very clear from our readings that is the best practice. I guess my curiosity is, right now we're trying to create something that I see it as something that would be long-term, not just for next semester necessarily, but not necessarily in this model. Is there some other way of providing this time to staff that doesn't involve removing half a day on a Wednesday? I mean, I know we're talking about just 2 hours out of the week, but the argument that people keep raising, and I'm not sure it's a valid argument. I'm not sure it's a good argument when we're balancing the two issues here, especially at the elementary level, is that, well, our students are so far behind, they're elementary kids, that's the most important time for them. Why would we take 2 hours if it's been working so far with the full schedule? I mean, what is the balancing there? Is there kind of some long-term view of this half day on Wednesdays? Is there another way of implementing it to give the teachers that time during the day? Is that not possible? What are the kind of factors? Why did we come to this at the elementary level?
So Dr. Menzel has said all along that this pandemic will cause us to innovate, will push us forward, problem solve, and we've already seen that. And so I can only imagine what we'll continue to use. We talked about it with the streaming and the cameras. There are districts that have additional early release scheduled for this type of thing.
Mesa.
Yeah.
Right,
And we have a calendar committee that's meeting right now to plan the next 4 years. And it hasn't really gained traction with the calendar committee because it was brought up. But it's just going to be interesting to see what sticks, what innovations we come up with. And really, President Beckham, you're so right about the data. We need to use the opportunity to grab the data to see what's working. So when this is all over, we continue to move it forward.
Yeah, no, I know, and I agree with that. I'm just curious, I mean, was there, in the committee that discussed the half-day, was there any ability to adjust the existing schedules for next semester where it wasn't a 2 hour, again, I know we are just talking about 2 hours, but for a lot of people, they don't view it as just 2 hours. They view this, understandably, as 2 hours being taken from their students and their children. And I've had teachers write to me asking, what is this about? On the other hand, I have teachers who are very supportive of this. So I know there's a lot of different perspectives. And again, I'm 100% on board with providing this and, letting it be teacher-driven, doing this. They need that time. That is how good school districts around the world run. But is there any other consideration, were there any other considerations about something other than a half-day Wednesday to get these teachers this time? Or is this really, just because of where we are, all the different factors at play, the only way to really get this time to them right now in this moment?
We really focused on managing students in person, managing students at home, managing students in quarantine or close contact, that just all of that, all the additional mitigation strategies, it's just so much. So it was really focused on what can we do that is not completely disruptive, that is, we're very careful about the instructional minutes and what the students that need to be in person. So it was a balance to try to meet a need.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that, thank you.
Vice President Beckman.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've been getting similar questions about just really, and I would be interested once we get a little further along. You don't have it here today, but you had it here last time, kind of some of those different buckets, because let's face it, we know there's going to be a lot of supports needed for these students. And while I want the collaboration time for our teachers so that they can obviously talk and see what the best practice going forward is and collaborate, et cetera, I also would like to see it support-driven, because, and SEL is important, but I would love to see those buckets again of what is going to be offered, because I think the focus for me is not only SEL, but it's going to be identifying those kids that have fallen far behind and getting that additional support that they need. And this is a perfect opportunity, for that to happen. My next question is, maybe I'm missing something, or we just weren't able to touch on it tonight, but the EDL at Echo Canyon is not in this presentation, or can we?
So we can talk about it. I did not bring back the last presentation. So that was covered in that. The only reason I'm here tonight, and of course we can talk about everything, was that we were modifying the Plan B.
Okay.
That in case we have to open with the Plan B, we're really hearing strong feedback that we want to open with the enhanced 2/3 of a day model for consistency, for having students on campus daily, for avoiding lunch, for having less passing periods, believing that it actually ups the instructional time because of all the mitigation efforts and the time it takes, instead of having students attend 2.5 days a week, where 2 of those days are full days.
And that's
So that's why.
A perfectly reasonable explanation. I just wanted to make sure, for the purposes of people watching, that because this was not included, that was not just no longer, or we're not, it was a little unclear when I looked at this. I thought, what did I miss? Did we do away with that?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, and I also want to be very clear that this is Plan B. Plan A for secondary is still 5 days a week with the Wednesday early release. So there also could be confusion of this is the new secondary model. No, this is the recommendation for the Plan B.
Thank you.
So a couple questions then. Plan A, I'm still on elementary. How does Plan A differ from Plan B for elementary?
Plan B for elementary is at-home learning.
Right. There's no middle ground for elementary. It's either
You are
you're
either
all in person or you're.
the whole time, and if it is deemed, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because that's one of my questions when we move to secondary, even though it deals with elementary also. At what point do you go back and forth? But for elementary, what does that Wednesday morning look like then? Because that hasn't, I don't think I saw a schedule for Wednesday morning, so that parents will know. Because is it a shortened schedule? Is it just whatever the first part of the morning is and the last 2 classes?
It's the regular early release time, which I think for most schools, Dr. Hagegat, is 12:20 early release for elementary, except for the couple of singletons that have later starts.
And so it's just shortened class periods, but you go through all of the classes that day? Is that the elementary model? Okay, just want to make sure that they know that that's what it is for that schedule.
Thank you.
I will mention, I would like to see it on a Friday. I think that that's the most disruptive to our students and to our parents. I think having a Wednesday afternoon can be very disruptive. for the students, especially in elementary. So I'll put that out there. Sandy Kravitz.
Historically, when we've had half-days on Fridays, then attendance does drop. Because even in COVID.
Oh, you mean attendance of elementary students?
Drop. It's a day for, let's take a long weekend, let's go to Flagstaff.
She's saying they don't even come in.
They don't
They
come
don't
in.
even come.
They just
They
come on
don't
sick.
come. You would see,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, then there's a reason why
We
you
have students
pick a Wednesday
take
over a
off
Friday.
because of
Right.
the Phoenix Open, so, half-day on a Friday, it's not.
Interesting.
The attendance is
And is that,
small.
that's been your experience too here? I guess we should be asking Evie.
I think it's anywhere you go.
Go. Oh, okay. All right,
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah, and I was asking that for I've actually discussed this, not all of this, but some of it, and it is also common for other districts in our state that do a very similar model, that they do it on Wednesdays. It's not, I guess it's not unique to us that we would be proposing the same model.
Okay. I just found it very disruptive. for the
There's
family.
also, this is so intricate, and I don't know if it's too detail-oriented, but transportation, right? I mean, how many times do I call Mr. Wagner and say, we have a new caveat for you, and he's been unbelievably gracious, but Panda Preschool is really difficult to transport because it's AM, PM. And the only way we can make Wednesdays work, there isn't Panda on Wednesdays. So if we were to move that, we would have to change the Panda schedule, and oh my
okay.
goodness, please
All
don't
right,
make me
that's
do that.
another
So
reason.
it's just, it's so interesting every time you think, oh yeah, we can do that.
No. All right. Well, that's good to know.
Mhm.
All right. All right, so any further questions for elementary? Otherwise, we'll move on to secondary. All right, we'll move on to secondary. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Board Member Perlberg.
Well, I'll just say very quickly, I'm very happy this evening that what we're hearing from our students is absolutely consistent with what you came to present tonight as far as Plan B. And hearing them speak about it, hearing you speak about it, it makes all the sense in the world. And again, Plan B, that can't be said enough tonight. We're all going to still cross our fingers. Come January, it's back to normal. But I'm with you. Let's never hear hybrid again. That sounds good.
Just really quick, I wanted to share early release for the elementary is 1:15.
Okay. Dr. Howigot just said that early release for elementary is 1:15. She just wanted to have a correction.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Howigot. I have to give kudos to the committee members. They really said this 2/3 of the day is evolving. The cameras and the technology are game changers. Let's be consistent. And so really, I think they were hearing from the students and the teachers, and it all came together.
Board Member Greenberg.
So for this model, then, the students have to be in attendance in the afternoon in order to ensure that we have the proper instructional minutes. Is that correct?
They have to be, so they all have to attend the 2/3 day.
Mhm.
So there's no EDL afternoon anymore.
Right.
We have the teacher academic support. What they have to do is the asynchronous work. So they don't necessarily need to sit on the academic support for an hour if they don't need that support, unless the teacher assigns it to them.
Mhm.
Okay, like if you're really struggling, I need to see you there. Or like me, I'm mom, you need to be there, I'm making sure. So, but what they do have to do is the asynchronous minutes. And so Dr. Bachna is keeping track of that. We also have to turn in, and every time we change our learning plan, we have to turn that in to Department of Ed. So this would be another modification. So that is how we, with these unique models in this unique time, how we make sure we have the instructional minutes or the instructional hours, pairing the synchronous and asynchronous.
So if you are required to do, if your teacher assigns you some form of support work that you need to do, I assume that is different from the asynchronous work In which case, do you then have to do what the teacher's assigning you plus the asynchronous work? Yes, okay.
Well, and maybe you're doing the asynchronous work with the teacher.
With the teacher as support,
yeah.
right, okay. So
I don't wanna
it might be combined, it could be separate and distinct. That depends on how the teachers feel you need to have this. For the full day, and again, I know this is about the 5-day, the full day, we are having lunch on campus on the full day. But we have been told that there are concerns with that even now, that there are potential concerns with that come January from the health department. What does that mean? I mean, does that mean if they say, yeah, that system is really ill-advised, we don't think you should be doing that, does that necessarily mean, I guess that would be, are we working on changing that? Or does that mean we have to move to the secondary plan B to avoid the lunch issue?
Yes, we're not making a new plan before then. So if we can return in person, that would be 6 classes with the passing periods with the lunch. And so if we cannot do that, then we would keep the enhanced Plan B and open with that, unless we had to revert to at-home learning, which I hope we don't.
But so I guess I'm just curious, I mean, is there, well, maybe that's because I don't know what the specific concern was. Was the specific concern that we would have a lunch period during the time that they do not advise that system as a whole?
Right, exactly. So when and we're talking about what COVID cases were 2 weeks ago or 3 when we had this conversation, and watching what the trajectory was, there was a lot of concern by public health officials that lunch and eating, right? We know this in a congregate setting, unmasked, close proximity, elevates the risk. And in our elementaries, having assigned seating with the dots on the table and you can spread out, it's a little bit different. If you go to Desert Mountain or you're doing one lunch, and you're dealing with high school kids, that ability, and even middle school kids to separate while eating, a lot more challenging. I mean, people were creative trying to figure out ways to address it, but it was a significant concern for the health department just because there's so little you can control and you can't do good contact tracing in a lunch environment. So for everything else, you can have assigned seating, you know where kids have been. If someone's positive, you draw your circle, you can do your contact tracing. Lunch throws that all out the window at the secondary level while the community spread rates are elevated. At what point will they say that they're not concerned? They didn't give us the reverse.
Right.
They just said, if you can continue doing what you're doing now as we head into January, because what they're looking at is that curve is probably not going to start moving in the right direction until after the first of the year. They expect it will. They don't know the time. And so they said, if you can buy yourself some time, that could help keep that curve moving in the right direction.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. And then one final question about the half-days from elementary school all the way through high school. That is, just to be very clear, that will be a teacher-driven period.
With
That is
the exception of the ones that were already scheduled in the calendar with planned PD.
Okay.
So the other 3 per month, yes.
So the other 3 per month, that is for the teachers to work with each other, plan, collaborate, identify students that need the help, do all that. That is for them to drive, with the exception of the period that was already planned for PD.
That is 100% accurate.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Perlberg.
Thank you. So I'm going to kind of go back, I don't know what I asked for elementary, but understanding it a little bit better now. So for our secondary, 4 days a week, except for the Wednesday, which really is kind of set aside for teachers too. The other 4 days, what I'm hearing you say again is that for some of our students, there will be required, potentially, and I'll use my favorite word, mandatory, though there'll be mandatory time that they may need to spend. It may be online. They could either be at home doing it, or they could be in the safe learning area provided on campus. But if they are required by their teacher to be in the support or this, I mean, I guess, I mean, I think
Yes,
we're all
and-
assuming it's remediation,
And
something like that.
what we're in the process of doing, and we have the expectations from previous models, and we keep getting better at this, fine tuning them, getting more consistent. So we're working with elementary and secondary. We're going to add the TILs, which we haven't done before, and now we're going to add the high school students. And so those little pieces of expectation, we'll learn when we hear more perspective of what's going to work. So I really want to listen to the print. I am, actually, it's happening right now because we have to have it ready to go by January. But we want to hear those pieces of the puzzle. But yes, if your teacher needs you to be there, you need to be there.
So you may have synchronous learning in that third of the day.
Almost like the extra period or the early hour.
That may actually be required. But again, if you need to, you can be doing that on the campus. It's not you have to rush home and, correct? I mean, okay. And so for the other students who maybe it's not a required synchronous time, there are still the expectations of the asynchronous lessons for those other 4 days as well. Okay.
And I suspect that it feels like a lot more because students are used to having a certain amount of homework. And now they have homework, but they also have schoolwork that they have to do on their own. So it feels different.
Right. Yeah, and they have other time in the day. Got it.
Because we're keeping up on the pacing.
Sure.
So that's so important.
Sure.
Yes.
Board Member Kravitz.
Something that was said jogged memory that I had asked about earlier. So on weeks when we have no school on a Monday or early release days later in the week or earlier in the week, are we still going to have early release Wednesdays?
So I looked at that because I think that was brought up. There's only 2 Wednesdays that happens. And I don't have my calendar in front of me, but I can send it to you. So because it's only 2 weeks that there's already either another half day off, it's like parent conferences or MLK Day, I'm not quite sure what they are. We thought that to just change those 2 Wednesdays would throw everybody off and be really confusing. So because it only happens twice, we're going to keep the early release every Wednesday. That's what the committee really felt strongly about.
Yeah, there's there's January 18th, the week of January 18th, we're off the 18th. February 15th, we're off. And then March, there's a week off completely. And then March 18th and 19th are listed as early release days for all grades. So
if the Wednesday is already an early release because of conferences and everything,
Right, and
then
then
the
the
teachers would be
18th and 19th.
participating in the conferences. There's also final exams on a Wednesday. So I can send it to you, absolutely, because I did it, we all did it with a highlighter. It was really fun.
Any other questions, Board Member Kravitz?
no, I'm done.
Okay. Vice President Beckman.
Shifting topics, but about secondary, can you kind of go over the camera with me? We've all seen the demo with regard to the teacher walking around the classroom and the student seeing the teacher. The reason I ask this is because I'm getting a little feedback with our current model EDL, and I know that's going to change, but that we're having some kids that are not turning their cameras on, which I think they're allowed to do, but the teacher is saying they don't even think they're really teaching to anyone. So my question is, how in this environment with these live cameras now in the top of the classroom, does the teacher see the students that are checked in at home, and how do they account for them being on and watching the lesson, and then circling back with them with regard to any questions, et cetera?
So I've seen it anecdotally, but we have Dr. Hirsch up in the sky, and she lives and breathes it. So
Okay.
Dr. Hirsch, if you're there, could you talk about the students that are streaming into the classrooms and how the teachers are making sure they're engaged?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, is this better?
Yes.
I like this? Okay, terrific. The teacher, I'd like you to repeat the question. There's been a lot asked, so I was following along. And
Dr. Hirsch, the question was that how does a teacher ensure that the students that are learning at home that are streaming with in-person students, how do we ensure they're engaged? Some of them aren't turning their cameras on. What strategies have you seen that teachers are using to make sure that those students are actually participating and learning?
Yeah, there's a large gamut of strategies for any kind of student engagement. When the students are streaming from home, the teacher can see their dot or their initial or their faces so that they know that they're there and they can call on them. I went into 60 classrooms today. As you know, we went online, and I walked into every classroom where the teacher was online with their students. I said, hey, please say hi to this kid. And the teacher would put their mask on and say, come on over and say hello, in many cases. And when I did, all of the kids' cameras were on. It's unusual for the students' cameras to be off during the entire period. While we can't require it, a lot of teachers, and it doesn't take much to motivate a student to say, hey, I want to see your face. And okay, we know already a lot of our students' habits. So the ones that really do struggle with camera use, and there are some, we have teachers can chat with them and say, hey, how are you? They can, do a quick note using Microsoft Teams or Zoom for the students to write to them right back. There's sometimes I see teachers say, take the first 5 minutes to respond to number 1 on your Google Classroom, and then hand it in, and you can hear the ding, 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 ding as it's all being handed in. So the teachers can look. I'll tell you, it takes a lot of talent to do that in person and EDL at the same time, but they do it. I see teachers walk around with their smaller laptops, standing kind of to the side. The kids can, the screen is shared. Some teachers have the students up on the large screen that are at home, and everybody can see each other to a certain extent. It kind of depends on the course. Many times in a foreign language course, you want to see everybody. You're doing some quick drills, and everybody at home is doing kind of the same thing. There's such a gamut, but the strategies are kind of boundless, especially when students are working for a grade. These are credit-bearing courses, and the students really do want to do well.
Thank you, Dr. Hirsch. I think Vice President Beckman has a follow-up.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. So to be clear, and thank you, that was really helpful. I really didn't understand the teacher's view as much as I understood the student view. So you're saying that the teacher on their laptop or whatever will see a grid of the students, just like we do in Zoom or whatever, and be able to walk around the classroom but come back and see that those kids are engaged. And then when, I guess, and this is where I'm curious too, when those kids have questions, when are they getting answered? How are they interacting? I know we worked hard on getting mics in the classroom so they could hear the other students, but what is the expectation, and how are the kids asking questions and those questions getting answered in a timely manner?
I just actually have a very funny story to tell you. I walked into an IB 9th grade social studies class about probably the middle of last week, and when the teacher was talking and addressing the class and said, are there any questions, booming from the ceiling was a student's voice with a question, and everybody kind of looked up at the camera. Even though they can't see him, the voice was kind of coming from that same speaker area. So, it was kind of like, who is speaking out of the ceiling? But the kids are getting very used to the dynamics in each of the classrooms, where in almost all cases, a teacher will say, are there any questions? And when they're doing that, the teacher is strategically standing near where they can see or hear their EDL kids. And don't forget, the EDL kids do come in the afternoon with additional questions. So at Desert Mountain, there's times designated. You have period 1, 2, 3 in the morning and 1, 2, 3 in the afternoon, and the teacher will often say, if you miss something, come to that. I just had a physics teacher tell me that this was also last week or before vacation, he had a student or many students who are now live and in person wanting to come on in the afternoon, and because they don't get home on the bus, at the same time as maybe their period starts on EDL because it's a little bit longer, he says, well, just jump on the last period and I'll help you then. So over all this time, everybody, like Dr. Guerin said, is getting better and better at the dynamic and how to handle it. I see all kinds of things, and I really appreciate the senses of humor of the students and the teachers. And I was listening to the students present, and it was disheartening to hear, the EDL kids on some of the surveys say that they didn't feel that they were getting paid attention to, et cetera. So those are things that at Desert Mountain and at other high schools, if the students are feeling this kind of concern, we ask them to reach out. We have a process for how they can do that. If first they talk to the teacher, and then we have a concern chart where then the parent can email the teacher and talk with the parent and the student together at the same time on Teams. If that's not working, we might involve the guidance counselor or the assistant principal whose area that is for the evaluation of that teacher. And what I've seen is a lot of times the student says, oh, I was just shy. I didn't want to ask right then. And the teacher will work something out with them. Hey, just drop me an email, and before 9 o'clock at night, I'll answer it. So they're coming up with all of the ways to form those partnerships and relationships for the technology that's either impeding them but should be benefiting them.
Thank you. That's reassuring.
And Dr. Hirsch, just so you know, we're all looking up at you while you're speaking, just like the classroom example.
That's true.
I'm glad my camera's off. That's all I can say.
So, real quick, I have a question, just to follow up. Somebody had mentioned on this topic that it sounded like we could not require a student to show their face. Is that a legal requirement, Ms. Marshall?
It's not necessarily a legal requirement, but in discussion way back when we started this whole journey, we had a lot of discussion about the equity involved in, not putting students in a position where they maybe were embarrassed to show their room or just weren't the kind of person who likes to be on camera. And so we were trying, I think, more in the social emotional realm to make students comfortable more so than anything about legalities.
Thank you for reminding me of that. So I have I have several concerns, but I want to make sure I have all the information. At what point would we be able to use Plan B come Plan A come January 4th?
So the metrics would have to have reversed pretty substantially in order to be able to do that. So if you think where we were maybe mid-October when we came back initially, there's a potential, again, it depends, right? You'd need to, and I'm thinking out loud here, I don't know that, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think that necessarily we would have to be all green in order to be able to do that. What I would be looking for is our cases per 100,000 would have to be very close to that. We've been there before. We just weren't there with all three. Percent positivity rate is a pretty significant indicator. And I would be looking to the health department on the lunch component, just because I think that's a concern. The truth is, part of the reason why we haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it is looking at the COVID trajectory. I don't think that there's any way that on January 4th, we are able to start with Plan A. I think that that's highly unlikely. There's not a statistical modeling analysis I've seen from any of our universities here in Arizona or across the country that would indicate that the curve will change that dramatically that quickly. So I think that it's really important to know when that time would be, that you move from Plan B to Plan A. I don't think it's going to be January 4th.
Okay. So real hypothetically, if it does not move to where we are in the lower portion of the hybrid yellow or green, we would be not looking at Plan A. We would be looking at Plan B and C.
So,
And when would we be in Plan B, and when would we be in Plan C come January 4th?
So Plan C is really if all three of the benchmark metrics are red, and that could actually happen. ADHS, Maricopa County Department of Public Health are in agreement. If all three are in red for 2 consecutive weeks, then you return to virtual learning for all students. That's the public health guidance and recommendation. I don't anticipate that changes. Will we get there?
Well, so if hypothetically, we are there.
Yep.
We come, we're following it through the holidays, and come December 30th, let's say that's the Thursday, I don't know that it is, we are all in red because we're going to give people notice.
Yes.
We're not going to wait to
That
the
is
day
correct.
before. We would say we would be all virtual. And Plan C is we will be offering all 6 classes online. Is this correct?
No,
So-
we would stick with the 2/3 day that we have now, because we want, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if we're in red, then we're going to have to most likely go to Plan B before we go to Plan A. So if we start with, and I don't know why I'm moving.
Hypothetical red, we're going to start with Plan C. I was under the impression Plan C was like Plan A. If we were in Plan A and we were 6 classes a day in person, and we had to go to Plan and go virtual, then it would be in the classroom, or it would be showing the 6 classes a day virtually. So if we were in Plan A and we had to go to Plan C, that's what it would be. But you're now telling me Plan C is not 6 days. So I just want to make sure.
We definitely can talk about it.
Well, I don't want to, we have to know tonight.
There's positives and negatives to both. So if we are completely, what's great, I wish the 3 schools that had to go online didn't have to go online, but they were able to pivot overnight and really went from Plan B to Plan C overnight, and did it just seamlessly. It really is so impressive. So I want to be really careful that if we have a C that's different from a B, it's going to cause a lot of disruption and confusion for students, because I don't think we're going to go from C to A.
So this is when I was sitting here thinking about, my understanding is that and I'm not trying to do a catch, I just am going back to when we were in our meeting previously, we were looking at A, B, and C, and I thought, A and C were 6 classes a day.
All
And
3
then we
were 6.
changed B, which is here.
Right.
So that's why I'm wanting to clarify that actually Plan C now is also changing because Plan B changed, where before Plan B was different.
That is accurate, yes.
Okay, so then, that's kind of new information for me as I'm sitting here thinking it
Right,
through.
yep.
When looking at second semester, it was, as a board member and representing the stakeholders, and as the parents that I am representing, that I know feel this way too, is that I was looking at second semester, I want to get back to, we went online 4th quarter, and we were just figuring it out. We had the summer to then figure out the fall, and there was definitely learning curves and But it still wasn't ideal. We are still not giving 100% instruction to our students. So it was my personal expectation that we would be doing that second semester. So, and we did that in Plan A, the Plan A, B, and C that we gave before, because we purchased the cameras and we were going to go to 6 classes a day. Now what I'm hearing is that no, we really, because we're really not going to be able to do Plan A, we're going to be really looking at doing, again, 3 classes a day synchronous, and then 3 classes a day asynchronous. And what we know is that gives students about 2/3 of the learning compared to if we did 6 classes a day.
So I would say that the math on a calendar might look that way. Practically, it doesn't. So when you think about instructional time, and this is part of what kind of is emerging sort of authentically in this conversation, what you're hearing from students is the benefit of that extended instructional period of time in terms of really mastering the content. It's why many schools have moved to a block schedule, because you have more time. Colleges don't meet 6 periods a day every day. And so thinking about the structure, it's really about how you're organizing the time that you have and making sure the time when you're not in a class with an instructor is purposeful time that's contributing towards learning the content. And the challenge with just automatically going back to the 6-period day in January, if we're all online, is it's not hard for us. Let's say, again, hypothetical, the first quarter, we have to be in Plan B. But quarter 4, we can return to a normal schedule. That's pretty easy. But if we move from a 6-period day online, which is not anything that we've tried to do online ever, we didn't do that in quarter 4, we didn't do that in quarter 1, so we've never done it before. What we heard from the students is that we need something that's consistent and predictable that we know. This is what they have in place. So if we move to implement that online when no one's ever done it before, and then we have metrics that say we can come back to in-person, but it's got to be Plan B, now they go back to what they had before. It's that kind of disruptive change in model that is frustrating for both students and teachers, but can be avoided if our Plan C aligns with Plan B, because moving back to the other model, whenever we're able to do that, that is the easier part of the shift, and it's a logical progression versus leapfrogging.
My concern as a parent, not as a student, and I'm talking as a parent, I am very concerned with my student going to school for 3 hours synchronous, even if it's 74 minutes. And I understand the block schedule that we're growing into. But I was surprised to hear, well, not surprised, because there's a learning curve for students too. But my concern is that I want to be assured that my student is learning the material. And I am having difficulty as a parent wrapping my head around the fact that my student is learning, and I understand there's a pandemic, learning just as much as if they were having 6 periods a day for the 5 days a week. And granted, there's the 2 hours that they're not getting in Wednesday, and that's okay. But I can't wrap my head around that we as a district we weren't able to figure it out. Just because we didn't do it, we've been teaching 6 periods a day traditionally forever, and now we bought these cameras so that the cameras could be in the classroom. So I thought that we could go back to providing the 6 classes a day, and I'm just going to use this 100% instruction, instead of having reduced instruction and reduced learning. And if we had data, which I understand we don't, I wish we did, to show that 3 hours a day with the asynchronous, that our kids are actually learning as much as I think they are, as much as I'm being told they are, I would feel much better about it. But we don't have that data. That provides an additional concern that I have, that we don't have that data.
So I can address the data separate from
the other
Right, but
comments.
is there, I guess, are there any other board members that are concerned for their students? And I guess you have the student, or if you had your students here, that they would be getting the foundation if they were in middle school and if they were freshman and sophomore, and then be college or career ready as a junior or senior when they're on this Plan B schedule. I see, with my own children, I see, study habits, test habits not being formed, just the work ethic of working 6 to 7 hours at a period was very important for my students, for my children when they went to college. They had that work ethic that they could then were successful in college. And I see some of that missing with this plan. So I just need more information or be convinced that we are doing right by our students, because I'm not convinced. So, Board Member Beck.
Should I?
Well,
sorry.
So I want to make sure I understand you correctly, because I think I agree with you. And I understand what you're saying, Dr. Menzel, is that currently the plan is laid out that we have A, B, and C. A is full return, which we were planning for, hoping for. B is the hybrid, right? That kind of, we hate that word, but
it's what we're doing now.
And then C is fully virtual, right? And so if I was to define that, it looks like we're doing a hybrid, fully virtual.
Correct.
And our parents, I don't know, I mean, you explained it very well, but from a parental aspect, I think our parents are going to struggle with saying, we just spent $2 million on cameras, we are all at home, why are we still getting half-day instruction live and then
Thank you for
then
saying
going
that,
to
Heather.
asynchronous? Because they asked that earlier. Why don't you just put cameras in the classroom and do 6 periods and split it up so the kids get breaks, et cetera? You have the ability, et cetera. So I think they're going to struggle with that. I understand the challenges with scheduling, and I know this is disappointing to hear our questions about this, but I understand your concern.
I just, as a parent, it's almost unfathomable to me that we couldn't figure it out, especially when there's other districts doing it and they're doing it well. At least I'm hearing they're doing it well. I haven't seen their data, which we will get, but it is just very concerning. Board Member Greenberg.
I do have a longer comment on that, but let's just start there. So what are the other districts doing full 6-day periods online for students?
That's a good question. Are there?
So I believe Ms. Redner might be able to answer some of that, but I'm aware of some districts that were full day and are scaling back on that because students are becoming not engaged, shutting down. It's really, as an adult, being online from 7:30 in the morning till 2:20 every single day, it's hard. So the really focused time with the asynchronous learning, when you're in a classroom and the teacher lectures for 20 minutes and then has guided practice and then you have independent practice and you're working on your own and you can ask questions, that is a lot what the asynchronous time is, or this academic support. So just the thought that the teacher is teaching directly for every minute of that time for the 6 periods is not what is happening before COVID. So it feels different and it seems different. We will have data at the end of the semester. K-8 has benchmark data. Secondary gives finals. We'll be able to do some comparisons there. We are going to look at failure rate. We're going to look at engagement rate, what students are actually engaging in the assignments, turning assignments in, having missing assignments. Dr. Hirsch is here tonight because she has quite a bit of anecdotal data. We're waiting for, we're waiting to the end of the semester to have this specific data, but her teachers are telling her and the technology, the TILs, we're looking at the pacing and the pacing guide and are we keeping up? And believe me, our high school teachers are aware of where they are. And so Dr. Hirsch can talk more about that, but we will bring the assessment data to you.
Well, I did find it interesting, the students talked about workload. And I think that needs to be be dived into, because the block schedule, there may be some nuances that need to happen if, instead of having that 6 period where in one period they're learning 2 to 3 days worth of work and they're not able to input it, and then they have these assignments that are shortened. But, and that's just a side note, because that's really, well, I'm just bringing it up because I want it to be looked at. I don't want it to look and say, hey, kids are learning 2/3 and everything's, great for them, when we're hearing that there's still some issues with it.
So I don't think anyone can deny the fact that regardless of what the teaching model is this year, I think the data is very clear from across the United States, our state, other countries, that students this year are behind, and some very far behind, others not. And I think anyone who argues that students can just make it up, we could close schools and students will make it up next year, I think any teacher and anyone here will say that that's almost certainly not the case, which is why it's so important to have schools. What I can say from personal experience, and granted this wasn't in high school, but it was at college for me, and doing my accounting classes for the Institute of Chartered Accountancy in Scotland, doing my bar exams, doing my coding, doing my continued legal education courses, that when you do a full day of videos from 9 to 3, it is mind-numbing. I mean, it's almost impossible for, and look, I was a straight A student, I was honors AP, I was 5th in my class, and there are students who are a million times more intelligent than I am in our district, but I think that by and large, to say that our plan B would be full 6 periods streamed online, I'm just going to say I think that would be very difficult for students to pay attention for that, for every day in and day out. I think.
No, it's Plan C.
C.
That's so
Plan
B
C.
would still be the hybrid version that they're in now. And you bring up a good point, and I'm.
Well, you would just get rid of B then. You just have A and C.
You would have C, but it would be a different hybrid, where you would have kids coming in. It would be the original one, where you have half the kids, because half the kids would be like a Monday, well, it has to be
Well, that's what A
Monday,
is.
Thursday, Wednesday, Friday, where they would be getting those 6 periods that day.
But
And then you are creative with lunch. We have outside lunch. But you have half the kids there, so you have more room to social distance with lunch, because it appears lunch is the problem with the old Plan B.
So just to be clear, so Plan A and Plan B are both hybrid plans by definition under the CDC. That is, so just to be clear with the public, otherwise we would not, if what we've been doing, that is a hybrid plan, because some of our students are online, even in Plan A.
Oh, because of EDL.
Right. So those are still hybrid plans, but what I'm saying is that, so under Plan A, that would mean that students who wish to continue an EDL would suddenly move to a full 6-period schedule, right? Which I mean, I know we're asking them to commit for the semester and everything, but that might not work so well. But with Plan B and Plan C staying with the 2/3, I'm just putting it out there that I think that there are some students who will be able to do it, absolutely, that's not an issue. But I think that a full day online where, the interaction is not, I guess, as organic as it would be in class. You don't have that system where someone's looking at you all the time and you have to be paying attention. I'm not saying you guys are wrong, because I agree that is certainly the perception and might actually be the reality of academic performance. But I don't know if there's sufficient data to show that they would be learning any more or less in this environment with that 6-period schedule. And the reason I asked the question was, I do know that there were school districts that were doing this 6-period day when we started out, but I was told from teachers in that district or from parents with students that those were all being rolled back because they couldn't. It's so difficult. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done it. I mean, I don't know how. It's really hard to express how difficult it is. Yeah.
Dr. Guerin?
Yes, is that Dr. Hirsch? Dr. Hirsch, go
Yes.
ahead.
So thank you so much. I have to first say thank you to all of you for being so dedicated and trying to, really land on something that is best for everybody. One of the things I did on October 7th, right before we went back, I put a survey out to teachers, and I was really asking them about the comfortability of coming back in the building. And I asked all the teachers, how far behind, or how on top of the curriculum are you? So 60%, and this is on August 7th, 60% of the teachers said they were right where they needed to be. 34% said that they were behind, and 6% said that they were significantly behind. Then when we came back to school on October 7th, or, after the break, since October 7th, here are a few things that have happened. Of course, we've gotten cameras. Secondly, all the beginning of the year review stuff kind of went on the wayside, so they started diving more deeply. And this would be something that math and foreign language that is really a linear progression would have, really seen more gaps right away. Plus, we had that wonderful gap analysis. So the teachers, when they came back, they did increase. They had been meeting 60 minutes a day, and then they went to 73 minutes a day. A lot of teachers over October break also flipped their classrooms so that they could do the content as a kind of a homework video and then have the questions and answers during the class period. So just 2 weeks into the school year, pretty much everybody was streaming with their EDL students and having afternoon sessions to cover the content that I'm hearing Board Member Beckham and Beckman concerned about. So with the split classroom, with the additional cameras, which were worth the money and have helped everybody, I've seen quite a bit of improvement on the pacing picking up. So on November 20th, I touched base with every single department leader and the TILs. I talked with the curriculum coaches at the district about the gap analysis testing early on. So our teachers made their SMART goals based on the gap analysis testing. And it was interesting because a lot of the gaps that we see are gaps anyway. Things that our kids struggle with year after year, they were just struggling with more. So the other awesome thing is you approved a lot of curriculum that has a lot of lessons that teachers can assign for kids who need review and thus and such. So that also helps to differentiate. So when I went around and talked to the teachers and I said, how far behind are you now? It was less so. One of my science teachers said, I am doing mostly demonstrations. They're not doing labs because it's not safe. But in the demonstration lab, it takes a little less time, so there's a lot more room for questions. And then she has flipped her classroom with the content. And her words to me were, my kids in advanced chemistry are still going to be sitting in a wonderful place when they start college. And these weren't teachers who I was saying anything to except asking asking these deep questions that they care very deeply about. And that's what they meet about weekly in their PLC. How far along are you? So for a quick brush stroke, I can just say to you, in the math department, the teachers have said, I'm about a half a chapter behind or I'm on point. Our IB and AP teachers have said they are figuring it out because they had the model from last year of what that online AP test looked like. The AP and the IB helped the teachers with lots of tools and a lot of ways to adjust. Then our hardest kind of hit kids, I would say, The students that need the in-person are getting it. And then we started, and all of the high schools have that tutoring time or the time for the kids, the safe space. At Desert Mountain, our safe space turned into us inviting students who were failing classes in the 9th and the 10th grade. So just like Dr. Guerin said, everything we're doing is improving and filling in gaps and accelerating our students from when we were at 60 minutes to 73 minutes each day. So yes, we are meeting less, but I do not really believe we are instructing less. I think the instruction is possibly different, or it's looking like we're having more guided practice in the classrooms or during that 73-minute time and doing some of our assessments in the afternoon or some in the morning and more in the afternoons to pick up so that we can give a decent assessment with the students. A lot of the teachers in the arts department, they have said they're not really behind in the arts departments, but they probably have faced the most challenge with performances and moving towards performance. So what do we do? How do we do this differently? And Michelle Irvin has brought in not just cameras, but also the smaller surface goes so that the teachers can bring those around with them for the EDL kids. And that's really helping everybody to stay up with the curriculum in the arts. In the World Language Department, they got new materials, so that has been a little bit difficult to get everything aligned right away. But now they're finding that with these new materials, they have really fantastic methods to help the students review. And one teacher, I was doing an observation, she went through how the book and the materials were working for the review, and she told the students how she described it to a parent who said, oh, great, now I'm going to be able to brush up on Spanish as well. So these things that we've just bought for the district serendipitously have also been helping us with the keeping the pace in COVID times, as we're liking to call it. The special education students have really incredible weekly bulletins with weekly looks at everybody's IEPs and the achievement of the students. It's been pretty impressive to look at how hands-on all of the levels of the district coaches are working with the teachers and helping them to stay on pace and also working with their curriculum materials. And I tell you, every time I turn around and I say something like, hey, Cheryl Redner, could we please have Screencastify? She said, yes, I'll buy a subscription for the whole district. So when the teachers are discovering the tools, we're getting right behind it, and it's pretty amazing. So I don't feel that they're being robbed of all of the instruction. I would love to be back at school. I had tears in my eyes today just knowing that we were not in person. But I also feel like our teachers are just going the extra mile or maybe even the extra 10 miles to help our kids stay on pace.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hirsch. I appreciate you providing that personal experience and the information directly from your teachers. Thank you. Board Member Kravitz.
I can't match Dr. Hirsch's eloquence, and I appreciate what she had to say. But to me, it boils down to, I get it, it's 2/3 a day on campus, and I appreciate what you said, Allison. But it boils down to the quality of the instruction. A block schedule is a concentrated learning block, and similar to what we all went through in college, so in some ways it also prepares our students for college if they choose that path. But even in a typical school year, you could have students, I'm thinking of one person in particular, where her high school student comes home, no homework, she's breezing through her classes. So in some ways, a block schedule demands, as I said, it's a concentrated block, so it demands more attention. It's you have to get through the material. So the 2/3 day, I get your concerns, but it doesn't concern me as much. The other piece of that is the asynchronous learning. Is that as well a quality, is that quality instruction,
Instructional
quality,
minutes.
minutes, or is it busy work? And I've heard from, I spoke with one principal, and their teachers are teaching quality, or providing quality asynchronous instruction. So again, it's somewhat on our principals to make sure that they are checking to see what is going on in their classrooms, and I'm sure, most, if not all of our teachers are, we know they're working extremely hard. So the Plan C, or whatever we're calling it, that does not concern me as much. I think as the students that were here said, consistency seems to be key for their learning. And I think we need to listen to our students, because they've provided us some very valuable feedback.
Vice President Beckman.
Thank you, I appreciate that, and thank you, Dr. Hirsch. I'll keep this brief. While we may land on this, I appreciate the dialogue, because I can tell you right now, with 5 of us, 6 of us sitting around this table, if these questions arise, you can bet that the parents of 22,000 kids are going to have questions about it too. So while it may seem belabored, we have to have these discussions, because I certainly would rather have them here for them to reference and get answers to than, them wondering why we did what we did and us repeating it and them feeling like we didn't give them any sort of heads up later on, et cetera. So I understand that may be a lot of screen time. That's a very rational response. And I guess there is that leap of faith that asynchronous will really be robust. And I know we're learning and we're getting better. So I'll leave it at that. I hope so.
Dr. Graham, what other options did you look at? Did you look at adding a 4th class to the day so that they could have 4 classes in person and maybe have scattered breaks to grab a snack or something and then go home for lunch, to try to get the students more in the school day?
We looked at so many things, and we even, and Dr. Hirsch in particular was talking about trying to have a snack and go as long as possible. And what this original model did was balance in-person learning with providing the EDL instruction. And so we could push it a little bit more, but we would then, students need to have time to get home and then to have that support from their teacher for the academic support and the social emotional support. So that would be shorter. And so we would just have to look at it, because now you're right, we don't have to do the streaming in the afternoon anymore for EDL, it's all in the morning. So that could be something that we look at. I don't know, Dr. Sackos, have any thoughts on that initially?
Yeah, I'm reflecting back to the earlier committee meetings where we had on the wall, 5, 6 different options and plans. I have to, remind everybody that our number one goal was safety. It was the physical safety and the social emotional safety. And that brought us back every time to the model that we're utilizing now. And I think the hearing from the kids, and of course, many of you know I have 2 girls in high school. And so as a mom, I think, doing a whole different C model that has not been experienced by high school kids, that 6 periods a day, would be difficult. And then I spend time with the student advisory board and I hear them as well. That consistency and continuity is something that they very much need. And so, we've looked at so many different models, and every time it doesn't matter the audience. When we think about priorities, and we didn't talk about priorities with kids, they, like Dr. Menzel said, this all came up organically from them. We did not feed them any information. But if we come back to the same model for a variety of reasons. So with that, the answer, the short answer is, yeah, we've looked at a lot of different models. We've looked at mitigation strategies for lunch. But when we get back to our ultimate goal of safety, physical first and social emotional, we land in the same place.
And you brought a few things back to me. So we talked about if we tried to do 1, 2, 3, 4, the next day would be what, 5, 6, 1, 2. I mean, so when it's more natural when you have 6 periods. The other thing we try to do is make them even longer than 73 minutes, and the teachers and the students said that is the longest block we can do. That you start to lose the value once you make a class longer than that. So we did push on all of this in an exhaustive way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope that in the parents that you spoke to were the parents that were in your original committee. You didn't take it out to any other parent groups?
So the representatives on the parent group were responsible for talking to other parents and seeking feedback that way. The other thing, Let's Talk, I have had tremendous amounts of very specific feedback, which gave us broad overviews, so we could really see some broad themes bubbling up, and then also some very specific situations that are unique to certain families. So that all along, hearing those stories and that passion from families really helped drive the work as well.
I think, too, one of the differences is that academics is probably my number one, with safety with a little hyphen, and I didn't hear that, so I can see how I am, this is my kids' education, and I'm disappointed I don't see that we don't have the data. I believe that we should have and could have had data. I don't know why we don't. Especially because I know we do benchmarks, so I don't know why.
We do have winter benchmarks scheduled. I can share the testing schedule.
But we have benchmarks. Don't we have it twice during we're in given that we're in a different situation and we are looking, I would have hoped that we would have had to have benchmarks knowing that we're coming up to this point to looking at second semester. I guess, too, I was hopeful that second semester we would have spent a lot of time looking at what worked at other schools as far as academically, what models did, and I just don't hear it. Maybe you did it, and you can tell me if you did, but what models were really working? Because we were looking at second semester possibly being different from what we did this semester. And so what models did schools do that academically they performed better than we did, and was it possible then to do it here? And I just haven't heard that breadth of research that could have gone on. And I just know from my own as a parent, and I know there are other parents out there like me, that this is not going to school, knowing that second semester, where we are, and going just for the 3 classes, and then doing asynchronous, which I continue to hear is done well in some places, but not done with fidelity with so many students that it's very worrisome to me. So for me, being academic-driven, data-driven, I really want to see how our kids, where they are right now. I mean, I would really like to see writing samples. I would like to see what else are we doing to see where our kids are. What are we doing? Why don't we have that? I just am disappointed in that.
And just a follow-up comment, President Beckham, my comments about going back to priorities of safety, is specific to looking at a schedule. In no way, shape, or form am I dismissing academics by any means. In fact, that is something that's
not the priority here.
It has been the priority, and we are continuing to strengthen the instruction that's happening in those classrooms. That's the non-negotiable for all of us, is to make sure that's happening. What's on the table really is what is a way that we can safely get our kids back into the classroom without breaking them. And we've heard from our student body, and I hear it not only from my own kids, but from in the community, because I live in the community, I work in the community. I'm active in the community, and I hear that as well. And trust me, it breaks my heart that my kids are not 6 periods a day, full day, every day in school. But I also understand the risks that come along with it. And again, to me, finding that better balance.
Wait, just one moment. I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Dr. Hirsch?
Dr. Hirsch, no.
Dr. Hirsch, could you mute, please? Dr. Hirsch? Thank you.
And so for me, and working, whether I'm a parent, an educator, for me, finding that balance that'll allow for us to increase mitigation strategies, decrease the number of students that we have to quarantine, is the balance we have to come to. Because the more we expose our students in those 6 periods a day and put in lunch, instead of on average quarantining 24 kids for one positive student, we're talking about at least 48, maybe up to 70 kids once we do our close contact identification. So again, it's kind of thinking about how do we, again, ensure that safety, but still make sure that academics is non-negotiable. I want that for my kids. I want that for every single child.
So did we look at then having the in-person for 1, 2, and 3 coming home and then having streamed the last 3 classes? We have the cameras so the teachers could be streamed. So they're not online for a straight 6 hours, but they have their 3 classes and then they have their 3 classes.
We did, and it came back to the transportation. So some of our families that come to us. I mean, we can talk about the open enrollment percentages at each of our campuses, which is quite large in some of our areas, and them traveling afar and not being able to get back if that's going to be that second half of the day with that mandatory instruction. And
we looked at adding like a 10-minute study hall after lunch to try to get the kids home, and it was the open enrollment students, to get them home to wherever, it was really hard with transportation. So we have looked at these.
If I can jump in real quick, one of the other problems with that is that half of their classes would be online all the time, and they wouldn't have the benefit of in-person.
Well, no,
half
because
their
it would switch every other day.
We actually had that. I remember the
boy.
poster, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. We really looked at it. I do have Dr. Bachna on the line. So I want to go back quickly to assessment if I could, because
Sure, that'd be great.
I really feel strongly about it. So, and I would love her to jump in, but when we have fall benchmarks, winter benchmarks, and spring benchmarks, that's what we do district-wide. That is absolutely not the only assessments we do. Teachers and professional learning communities use School City, our district platform, to create formative assessments to drive instruction. That's why Dr. Hirsch could speak with such specificity about where her students were. So we could absolutely pull up some data from School City, but what we require district-wide are these benchmarks. And so we changed the fall benchmarks this year. We didn't want to have the students take them their first week back while they were online learning. And so we changed them to be gap analysis, and you heard her speak to that. We have winter benchmarks that are going on right now, and we will be able to compare winter benchmarks from this year to winter benchmarks from last year. Now, it's a different cohort of students, but we'll be able to see, and we absolutely expect some learning delays because of COVID, as we spoke about that. So Dr. Bachna, is there anything else you'd like to add about that process?
No, that's great, Dr. Guerin. I think you've covered it. Our winter benchmarks just started yesterday, and they go through the end of the semester. So we give the schools 3 weeks to administer those, and we've encouraged them to do those. And we do know that's being done online, which introduces another complexity of, this is different, that the kids are taking them at home as opposed to in person at a lot of places. Yeah. So we're going to have that combination of effects going on.
Thank you, Dr. Bachna.
Mm-hmm. So Dr. Bachna, how are you taking into account that some of the benchmarks will be online, and how are we enforcing that, or are they open book, or how are we enforcing that the students are?
So for high school finals, Ms. Redner is on the call. We have a lot of different subgroups going on. So we have one focusing on what the finals will look like. One, we'll look
Oh,
at.
I'm sorry, I was talking about the benchmarks, the winter benchmarks, so that we can do a comparison. What are we taking
We
into?
absolutely are going to have to reflect on the data and understand that data was from a non-COVID environment with students in person, and that this is different. So we're going to have to understand that it's not necessarily comparing apples to apples. So Dr. Bachna, do you want to speak to that at all?
We do put out information to families to please do not assist your students in taking these assessments if they're taking them at home, that they're formative assessments and that we're trying to evaluate where the students are at as opposed to having hopefully too much family support. We do encourage the teachers, if it's possible, if this is a streaming environment, to have the students log in and take the tests during the streaming time where the teachers could monitor some of that going on. So we have a variety of things we're trying to do to alleviate any kind of concerns about the testing environment being different for the kids in person versus at home.
And Dr. Bach, thank you for that. And Dr. Bachna, when will the benchmark assessments be made available?
The results?
The results, yes.
Or the test?
The
Okay.
outcomes, no, the outcomes.
The outcomes, the last day of school is the 18th, and then we're on break, so in January, the results will be posted for each school. The results are in the system. The tests are given through School City, so the teachers can see the results as the students test. But generally speaking, the comparison of results will be in early January.
In January, okay. All right, thank you. Board Member Greenberg.
One more question. For the students themselves, are they encouraged not to answer questions if they don't know the answer as opposed to guessing? Because
they're encouraged
if you start guessing
their
things
best
and they're
response
right.
generally.
Okay.
We do want to see where they're at. Even if they don't know the answer, that's something that's useful information, especially since considering a lot of our students might be changing modalities of learning in January. They might be coming back in person when they've been at home. So it'll be really useful for those teachers to have that data point from right at the end of this semester to see where the students are at.
I appreciate that. One, I guess, final question, but not for you, Dr. Bachna, unless somebody else has a question for Dr. Bachna.
No.
So just to be very clear, because it was our hope that we would be able to do the hybrid Plan A model where you would have a full day of instruction except for the Wednesdays, full day of instruction, 6 periods a day, in person, and if desired online, you could live stream it. But because of the way our cases are growing and the way our metrics are going, right now at this time, there is a real concern that we would not be able to do that and that we would have to either stick with Plan B or, if things get really bad, move to complete virtual. So I want that to be very clear with the community that all of the advice and guidance we've been given, that is the current situation we're at, that these are legitimate concerns. Because I know I raised this the other night and people were confused by that, but these are not made-up concerns by this board. Those are concerns made by the CDC, Arizona Department of Health Services, and Maricopa County Department of Public Health. These are very real concerns that we might not be able to return in January as we have desired. So I just want the public to be aware of that. I want everyone in this room to be aware of that. Obviously, Dr. Fauci said it best, keep them open at all costs, but there is a cost, and that is we have to probably close other things to curb this rise. So I'm really hopeful that those cases do miraculously decline, and we can go to the Plan A, full 5 days a week, full 6 periods every day. But just want everyone to be apprised that might not be a possibility, unfortunately.
Board Member Kravitz.
Thank you. Had there been any discussion about extending each class period from 73 minutes to 90 minutes since we are having a shorter, and actually maybe that would make it a 3/4 day, but since we are having a short Wednesday or early release Wednesdays?
So we heard from teachers and administrators that adding that additional time would really, we wouldn't capture it's so much time for one period of class. There hits a point where you're just not getting the value for it because it's too long. The other piece is transportation. We have a 2/3 day in secondary, and we have a full day in elementary and a full day in self-contained special education programming K-12. And Mr. Wagner, it becomes problematic to get to the elementary runs the later the secondary day is. So it's difficult.
And we didn't consider starting second, or elementary maybe earlier and ending a little bit later?
Bless you.
I know.
That's true.
I know.
Education and-
I would get a lot of let's talk on that.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay. Thank you very much. We'll just have do I have a motion to approve the action item A? And do you have how you would like your request, your recommendation to be worded, Dr. Guerin?
So I believe it's in the action item that would you approve the secondary Plan B updated model?
I would, if we're going to add something, I would add Plan C as well, because I think it's been revised from the original.
Well, I would just add, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the Plan B that we're asked to approve tonight, it really is what we're living right now.
It is, but it's improved.
Yes.
It's
It's
improved.
Right.
Yeah, the idea of the asynchronous learning, yeah, I guess.
And the live streaming.
The live streaming, so the synchronous learning for our on EDL students is, there's a lot more synchronous now because they'll be.
Because they can go on.
But it ultimately improved, but it is what we're living. I just want our community to kind of understand that.
Right.
And that most likely, hopefully, at the very least, we're living in Plan B and not in Plan C. I mean, I would just simply add the comments, I understand what you're saying. I think it's online learning. It is subpar, in my opinion. I am not a fan of online learning. We know the vast majority of our community is not learning. Our students said it tonight. They need in person. They do better in person.
Mm-hmm.
Plan A is the best. Plan B is a compromise, and Plan C is. I struggle to see, I don't think you're going to see that much difference in quality if you have kids looking at a screen from 7:45 to 2:15, or if you have the block schedule and a break that's, I think it's going to be, no matter what, it's online learning. And I don't think there's going to be, to cause the disruption that it would, I don't think you're going to see a significant change in the quality
outcomes.
and level of learning that you get. And so, I mean, that's just where I stand tonight. So.
That's great, thank you. Okay, is there a motion?
So we're doing B and C. Are we allowed to do that?
So can I just ask, I don't think we said anything about Plan C except for it was all virtual. I don't know that we discussed anything specific about it. So I think we have verbally clarified what that would be by modifying Plan B. We never outlined anything specific about how that would be, because we said we're just all online.
Okay.
So I think this is just clarifying its alignment with the new Plan B as a part of how we're proceeding.
All right. So I move to approve the instructional model for spring semester Plan B as amended or revised.
Is there a second?
Second.
Vice President Beckman seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Aye. Motion carries 4-1. We'll move on to action item B, second read and approval of revisions to policies, AC-non-discrimination, equal opportunity, ACE, exhibit, ACR regulation, ACA, general harassment, ACAR regulation, ACAA Title IX Sexual Harassment, ACAA-R Regulation and Deletion of Policy GBBA Staff Sexual Harassment, and GBBAR. Michelle Marshall, our General Counsel, will be presenting. Thank you, Ms. Marshall.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Hopefully we can make this quick and painless. Just to remind you all and our audience, if they're still with us, you discussed these policies at the November 17th meeting. It seems so long ago. And what I'm bringing back for you tonight is just the revisions that were a result of the feedback received from the board that evening. Let me see here. Oh, good, it has the green highlights. I was not totally sure we had the right version here. So what my lovely paralegal Louise did was highlight in green the changes that we made that are different from the last time we were here with these. So that should help us go through these fairly easily. For policy AC, non-discrimination/equal opportunity, you'll recall the board had discussion about adding in the word district and governing board, and we changed it to are committed to that statement that we had in there before. And we repeated that down here, district and governing board are committed to a policy of non-discrimination, et cetera. Those are the only changes to policy AC. And I will keep moving unless I see questions or concerns.
Any questions, comments? Thank you.
For ACA, you'll recall this was called general harassment, mysteriously. We are changing it to sexual harassment as recommended by ASBA. And we just had one change that Board Member Greenberg noticed last time. We had compliance officer where we really intended that to be superintendent. So we made that change in this policy. And that is the only change for that one.
Any questions? No questions?
All right. Let's see. Looks like we had a change on the regulation to that one as well. Probably, I'm thinking it was the same. Oh, that's right. We had this discussion last time, you'll recall, we talked about best practice of keeping the complainant informed of what's going on. And so at Board Member Greenberg's suggestion, we added that language. And I think that was the only change there.
Any comments, questions? Next.
Oh, I apologize. I skipped over the regulation to AC, the non-discrimination, equal opportunity. We did the same change there in that regulation of keeping the complainant apprised of what's going on with the investigation. Let's see, did I do ACAA? I don't think I did. This is our Title IX sexual harassment policy, which we do not currently have, but are recommending adopting based on the changes to the rules implementing Title IX. You'll recall the model language didn't include associations, which is what's relevant in Scottsdale and Arizona. So we added that language there, and I believe that was the only change there.
Okay, any questions, comments? Nope. Next.
And that is all of the changes that we made based on the discussion from last time.
So it appears we don't have any comments or questions. Sounds like you did a great job. Thank you. Phew. Do we have a motion to approve action item B as presented?
So moved.
Board Member Kravitz moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
Board Member Greenberg seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I move to adjourn this special meeting of the Governing Board. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Kravitz seconds. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes 5-0. This special meeting of the governing board on December 1, 2020 is adjourned at 8:47 PM. Thank you all.